gaslighting to distort reality. Gaslighting is one of the most insidious psychological weapons ever wielded, capable of making a person doubt their own mind, memories, and perception of reality. It is not just lying, it is a calculated erosion of someone's confidence in their own truth. At its core, gaslighting works by denying, twisting, or fabricating facts in such a convincing way that the victim begins to question their own sanity. Imagine remembering a conversation vividly, only to be told it never happened, over and over, until you start to believe you imagined it. That's the slow, poisonous magic of gaslighting. This manipulation sinks its claws into your deepest vulnerabilities. Humans rely on their memories and perceptions to make sense of the world. When those are sabotaged, everything becomes unstable. Gaslighters exploit this by acting with unwavering certainty, turning their fabricated reality into the truth while making you doubt yours. The more you defend yourself, the more they use your emotional reaction as proof that you are irrational or unstable. They will contradict you about events you know happened, dismiss your feelings as overreacting, and twist past conversations until you begin to apologize for things you didn't do. In relationships, it becomes a prison without walls. You feel trapped, but you can't even trust your own mind enough to find the exit. It's a mind war where the battleground is your own sense of self. The emotional toll is devastating. You start to second-guess every thought, every choice, every recollection, until your identity itself feels like it's slipping away. And the cruelest part, by the time you realize what's happening, the gaslighter has already built a reality where you're too broken to fight back. Love bombing to create dependency. Love bombing is a dazzling, intoxicating form of manipulation that disguises itself as the most passionate, perfect love you've ever known. It begins with an overwhelming flood of affection, attention, and grand gestures, lavish gifts, endless compliments, constant texts, declarations of destiny, designed to sweep you off your feet and make you feel like you've finally found the one. It's not real love. It's a calculated strategy to hook you emotionally and psychologically before you even realize you're being caught in a web. The manipulator studies your needs, insecurities, and dreams, then mirrors them back with such intensity that you feel seen and cherished in a way no one else has managed. They make you believe you are extraordinary, irreplaceable, chosen. Your brain bathes in dopamine and oxytocin every time they call you their soulmate or promise a perfect future together, creating a powerful chemical bond that's almost impossible to resist. But love bombing is not about love. It's about control. Once you are addicted to their affection, they begin to withdraw it little by little, making you desperate to win it back. You start compromising, tolerating red flags, and sacrificing boundaries, all in the hope of feeling that intoxicating high again. The dependency it creates is deep and primal. You crave their approval, fear their disappointment, and begin to measure your worth through their validation. And the cruel twist, the person who made you feel like the most cherished soul in the world is the same one who will withhold that love until you are willing to bend entirely to their will. Intermittent reinforcement. Intermittent reinforcement is a psychological trap so powerful that it can keep people chained to toxic relationships, manipulative bosses, or destructive habits far longer than they ever imagined possible. It works by delivering rewards, love, approval, kindness, attention, sporadically and unpredictably. You never know when the next good moment will come, so you cling desperately to every crumb, hoping it will lead to another wave of warmth or praise. This pattern mirrors the mechanics of slot machines, one of the most addictive inventions in human history. The unpredictability creates a deep psychological hook. Your brain becomes addicted to the anticipation, constantly seeking that next hit of pleasure or relief, and the manipulator knows exactly when to give it, just enough to keep you from walking away. In a relationship, intermittent reinforcement can mean long stretches of neglect, cruelty, or indifference punctuated by moments of tenderness or passion. After days of cold silence, a single "I miss you" can feel like a flood of salvation. After weeks of criticism, one heartfelt compliment feels like proof that things can still be good. The highs feel intoxicating precisely because the lows are so unbearable. Over time, this trains you to tolerate the unacceptable. You tell yourself, they can be so sweet when they want to be. You cling to those moments, convincing yourself they mean more than they do, because the pain in between has hollowed you out. And so you stay, hooked not on consistent kindness, but on the rare, unpredictable rush of relief that keeps you forever reaching for a reward that may never truly come. Silent treatment as punishment. The silent treatment is a cold, calculated form of emotional punishment that cuts deeper than most people realize. On the surface, it may seem like simply needing space, but in the hands of a manipulator, it becomes a weapon designed to control, shame, and destabilize you. By deliberately withdrawing all communication, no words, no eye contact, no acknowledgement of your existence, they create a suffocating emotional vacuum where your mind begins to spiral. Humans are wired for connection and social validation. When those are suddenly ripped away, the brain interprets it as a threat. This triggers anxiety, confusion, and a desperate urge to fix whatever went wrong, even if you did nothing wrong at all. The manipulator knows this and uses silence as a form of psychological starvation, making you crave even the smallest scrap of attention. What makes the silent treatment so devastating is its ambiguity. You don't know exactly what you did, how long it will last, or what will end it. This uncertainty gnaws at you, making you overanalyze every interaction, every word you've spoken. You may begin apologizing profusely, offering favors, or bending your own boundaries just to earn back the bare minimum of acknowledgement. It's not about resolving conflict. It's about dominance. The silent treatment shifts all the power to the one withholding affection, forcing you into the role of the pursuer, the guilty party, the one responsible for mending a fracture you didn't cause. And in that silence, they don't just punish you. They teach you that love, approval, and peace are privileges you must earn, even at the cost of your own dignity. Guilt tripping for compliance. Guilt tripping is an emotional chokehold that turns your own conscience into a weapon against you. It's the art of making you feel responsible for someone else's disappointment, pain, or misfortune, whether or not you truly are. The manipulator plants subtle seeds of shame, framing your choices as selfish, ungrateful, or hurtful until you're weighed down by the crushing need to make it right. And making it right almost always means doing exactly what they want. This tactic works because guilt is one of the most powerful human motivators. We are wired to seek belonging, to repair ruptures, to avoid being seen as cruel or uncaring. A skilled guilt tripper exploits this wiring by exaggerating their suffering or painting themselves as a martyr to your supposed shortcomings. A sigh, a disappointed look, a carefully chosen phrase like, "I guess I just don't matter to you." These become invisible shackles, tightening with every beat of your heart. Over time, you learn to preemptively sacrifice your needs to avoid triggering that guilt. You start saying yes when you want to say no, apologizing for boundaries, overextending yourself to make it up to them. The manipulator doesn't have to demand anything outright. You do the work for them, driven by the unbearable weight of not wanting to be the bad person. The most sinister part is that guilt tripping rarely ends with relief. Even after compliance, the manipulator often keeps the guilt alive, subtly reminding you of your debt. It's a cycle where your kindness and empathy are twisted into tools of control, leaving you trapped in a loop of emotional servitude. Playing the victim is a manipulative tactic that weaponizes sympathy, twisting compassion into a leash. It's the art of casting oneself as the innocent sufferer, no matter the reality, in order to deflect blame, avoid responsibility, and gain power over others. This strategy preys on the natural human instinct to protect and comfort those in pain. By painting themselves as perpetually wronged, mistreated, or misunderstood, manipulators can disarm even the most guarded people and turn them into loyal defenders. The victim role is rarely random. It's crafted. They selectively reveal stories of past betrayals, failed relationships, or ongoing hardships, often embellished or stripped of context to elicit pity and create an emotional bond. They position themselves as fragile, making you feel like you must tread carefully, forgive quickly, and excuse their harmful behavior because they've been through so much. Over time, you may find yourself taking on more of their burdens, apologizing when you've done nothing wrong, or tolerating things you'd never accept from anyone else, all because walking away feels like abandoning someone who needs you. The brilliance of this tactic is that it reverses the roles. You become the aggressor for setting boundaries, while they remain the perpetual casualty. And if you challenge their narrative, you're met with hurt disbelief, maybe even accusations of cruelty. This reinforces the trap, making you the villain in their story, while they continue to collect sympathy, attention, and control. In the world of the perpetual victim, every confrontation is another wound for them to showcase, and every ounce of your empathy becomes another chain they quietly wrap around you. Triangulation to cause jealousy. Triangulation is a psychological ploy where a manipulator pulls a third person into the dynamic, whether real or imagined, to provoke insecurity, jealousy, and competition. It is a game of power disguised as casual conversation, harmless comparison, or innocent mention. But beneath the surface, its purpose is to unsettle you, make you question your worth, and force you to fight for the manipulator's attention, approval, or love. They might bring up an ex who still checks in, a coworker who really understands them, or a friend who always supports their ideas. Sometimes they don't even need another person physically present. The mere suggestion of a rival is enough to stir anxiety. This taps into a primal human fear, the fear of being replaced. That fear can be so consuming that it drives you to overcompensate, to prove yourself, to try harder to be the one they choose. The manipulator thrives in this chaos. With you off balance, they become the prize you're chasing, the one holding the power to validate your worth. Your focus shifts from questioning their behavior to questioning your own value. You might start changing how you dress, what you say, or even your core beliefs, anything to eliminate the competition. Triangulation is especially cruel because it poisons trust while making you dependent on the very person creating the insecurity. Every mention of someone else becomes a subtle reminder that your place in their life is never guaranteed. And in that constant state of rivalry, they don't just control your actions, they control your self-perception, turning love into a battlefield where they are always the victor. Fear appeal, persuasion, fear appeal. Persuasion is a manipulative technique that preys on one of the most primal forces driving human behavior, fear. At its core, it involves presenting a threat, danger, or looming consequence so vividly and convincingly that the target feels compelled to act exactly as the manipulator desires. It is not about logic or reason. It's about bypassing critical thinking entirely by activating the fight or flight response. When fear takes the wheel, rationality is shoved into the back seat. This method works because fear is one of the oldest survival mechanisms in the human brain. The moment we sense danger, whether real or imagined, our nervous system floods us with stress hormones, narrowing our focus to immediate action. Manipulators exploit this biological wiring by crafting scenarios that make you feel unsafe, unprepared, or on the verge of losing something precious. They might warn you of catastrophic outcomes if you don't comply, exaggerate risks, or paint vivid pictures of what will happen if you fail to act. In marketing, it could be a company telling you your health is in grave danger without their product. In relationships, it could be a partner threatening to leave or expose secrets unless you bend to their will. In politics, it's the endless drumbeat of us versus them to keep populations compliant. The fear doesn't even have to be real, only believable enough to trigger that primal panic. Once fear has gripped you, compliance feels like safety. And that's the trap. The manipulator positions themselves as the only one who can protect you from the danger they've made you believe in, chaining your obedience to the illusion of survival, mirroring to build false rapport. Mirroring to build false rapport is a deceptively charming manipulation that makes you feel as if you've stumbled upon a kindred spirit, someone who understands you so perfectly it feels almost fated. The manipulator studies you with precision, picking up on your speech patterns, posture, interests, and even your emotional rhythms, then reflects them back to you with uncanny accuracy. Every nod, every shared coincidence, every echoed opinion is designed to lower your guard and make you feel instantly connected. Humans are drawn to similarity. It signals safety and familiarity on a primal level. When you meet someone who seems to share your quirks, your worldview, your sense of humor, your brain floods with trust and openness. A skilled manipulator weaponizes this instinct, turning what should be a natural bond into a trap. They will subtly match your tone, adopt your mannerisms, and sprinkle your own phrases into their responses, making you feel deeply understood. But behind this reflection is no genuine connection, only calculation. The shared passions, the aligned values, the mutual dreams are often fabrications or exaggerated to keep you hooked. Once they have earned your trust, they can more easily influence your decisions, extract personal information, or steer your emotions in ways you never saw coming. The effect is intoxicating because it bypasses skepticism. You want to believe you found someone who truly gets you. And that's the danger. By the time you realize the mirror they held up was only a mask, you've already revealed pieces of yourself that can be used to control you. Manufactured scarcity. Manufactured scarcity is the deliberate creation or illusion of limited availability to heighten desire, urgency, and compliance. It is not about something genuinely rare. It's about making you believe it is, so you feel an almost primal need to act before it's gone. This tactic manipulates one of the deepest instincts in human psychology, the fear of loss. Our brains are wired to value what is rare, and when something appears to be slipping away, our emotions override logic. The manipulator knows this and plays it like a symphony. They may hint that their time, love, or approval is in short supply, making you fight harder to earn it. They might set arbitrary deadlines, limit spots in a deal, or claim that others are already interested, igniting a sense of competition. In romantic or social settings, they might talk about other potential partners or opportunities, subtly suggesting you could be replaced at any moment. This scarcity doesn't just make you want the thing, it makes you willing to compromise your standards to get it. You ignore red flags, rush decisions, and offer more than you normally would, all to secure something you believe is about to disappear. The truth is, the last chance was never real, the limited time was never ticking, and the exclusive access was always available. But by the time you realize it, the emotional damage is done. You've invested time, energy, and often your dignity in chasing something that was never truly rare, only made to feel that way, so you would never stop running after it. Foot in the door technique. The foot in the door technique is a subtle yet incredibly effective manipulation tactic that begins with one small, seemingly harmless request. You agree because it feels insignificant, easy, and low risk. But that small yes isn't the end, it's the opening. Once you've complied with the initial request, the manipulator gradually escalates their demands, knowing you're far more likely to agree to the next one because you've already committed. This works because of a powerful psychological principle. Humans crave internal consistency. Once we see ourselves as the type of person who says yes to someone or supports a certain idea, we feel compelled to maintain that self-image, even when the requests grow uncomfortable or unreasonable. It's a slow, invisible erosion of your boundaries. It might start with lending a small amount of money, doing a quick favor, or agreeing to a tiny change in plans. Before long, you're sacrificing time, energy, or resources far beyond what you would have ever agreed to upfront. And because each step seems only slightly bigger than the last, you barely notice how far you've been led. This technique is dangerous because it bypasses resistance entirely. You never feel the need to push back against a massive request. It's already too late. You've been conditioned to agree. The manipulator counts on your desire to be consistent, to avoid the discomfort of saying no after a string of yeses. By the time you realize the cost, you've not only given them what they wanted, you've also built a narrative in your own mind that agreeing was your choice all along. Door-in-the-face technique. The door-in-the-face technique is a cunning psychological tactic that manipulates your natural instinct to compromise. It begins with an outrageous request, something so excessive, unreasonable, or impossible that you're almost guaranteed to reject it outright. This first request isn't meant to succeed. It's bait. Once you refuse, the manipulator quickly follows up with a smaller, more reasonable request, one they actually wanted all along. By comparison, the second request feels modest, even generous, and you're far more likely to agree to it. This works because of two powerful psychological forces: contrast and guilt. The stark difference between the absurd first demand and the smaller second one makes the latter seem like a fair middle ground. At the same time, rejecting the first request triggers a subtle sense of guilt or social obligation. You feel like you owe the person something, so you're more inclined to concede to their follow-up. Imagine a fundraiser asking you for a $1,000 donation. You refuse. They immediately ask if you could at least give $50. Suddenly, $50 feels insignificant compared to the original request, and you say yes, forgetting that you may never have considered donating at all if they'd started with that number. In relationships, this might appear as a partner pushing for something extreme, like moving in after a week, only to compromise with a smaller but still self-serving request, such as leaving belongings at your place. The genius of the door-in-the-face technique is that it makes you feel like you've won a negotiation, when in reality, you've been led exactly where they wanted you from the start. Authority bias, exploitation. Authority bias exploitation is the calculated use of perceived power, expertise, or status to override your critical thinking and make you comply without question. It taps into a deep-rooted human instinct. From childhood, we're conditioned to trust and obey authority figures, parents, teachers, leaders, believing they have more knowledge, wisdom, or moral ground than we do. A manipulator seizes on this wiring, presenting themselves as the unquestionable expert or aligning with the symbols of power to gain instant credibility. They might flash credentials, name-drop influential connections, or adopt a commanding tone that brooks no dissent. Their appearance, posture, and speech are carefully crafted to radiate confidence and dominance, making you feel smaller, less informed, and in need of their guidance. Once that imbalance is established, your instinct is to defer, to silence your doubts, and to accept their version of reality as fact. This is why people will follow harmful orders, believe outrageous claims, or agree to things that go against their own interests, because someone with the right title, uniform, or air of authority told them to. The manipulator doesn't always need real credentials. Sometimes all it takes is the performance of authority to bend your will. The danger lies in how effortlessly this bypasses logic. You're not persuaded through reason, you're persuaded through submission to perceived rank. And by the time you start to question whether their authority is genuine, you may have already acted in ways that compromise your values, safety, or independence, all because your mind was conditioned to believe that those in power must be right. Social proof manipulation. Social proof manipulation exploits one of humanity's oldest survival instincts, the urge to follow the crowd. For thousands of years, sticking with the group meant safety, and breaking away meant danger. Today, manipulators twist that instinct into a weapon, creating the illusion that everyone is doing, believing, or supporting something, so you feel compelled to join in without questioning it. At its core, social proof is powerful because humans look to others when they're uncertain. If you see a restaurant packed with people, you assume it's good. If you hear countless glowing reviews about a product, you assume it's worth buying. Manipulators know this, and they manufacture that perception. They fake testimonials, buy followers, stage events to look popular, or surround themselves with people who validate them publicly. They flood your environment with the same message from multiple sources until it feels like common knowledge. This creates a psychological trap. The more you believe everyone thinks a certain way, the harder it becomes to oppose it. You fear looking foolish, being judged, or standing out as the only dissenting voice. The manipulator doesn't need to convince you directly. They let the weight of the majority crush your doubts for them. In personal relationships, they might casually mention how all their friends agree with their side of a story. In business, they highlight overwhelming demand that may not exist. In politics, they use stage crowds and choreographed applause to signal mass approval. The more you feel outnumbered, the more likely you are to surrender. Not because you were persuaded, but because you were herded, and that's exactly how they like it. Isolation from support networks. Isolation from support networks is one of the most devastating and strategic forms of control because it doesn't just cut you off from people, it cuts you off from your reality. A manipulator knows that as long as you have friends, family, or colleagues who can offer perspective, comfort, and validation, their power over you is limited. So, they begin to erode those connections, often so subtly that you don't notice until you're standing alone. It can start with offhand comments about your friends. They don't really understand you like I do. Or complaints about your family. They just cause you stress. They might manufacture conflicts, stir drama, or create situations where you have to choose sides. Sometimes it's framed as love or protection. I just want you to spend more time with me. Or I don't trust how they treat you. Slowly, your world shrinks. Once you are distanced from your support network, your reality is no longer being checked against others' perceptions, doubts, fears, and questions that friends might have reassured you about now linger unchallenged. You begin to rely solely on the manipulator for validation, emotional support, and guidance. That dependence makes their control almost absolute. Isolation also magnifies your vulnerability. Without outside voices, you're more likely to accept their version of events, their criticisms, and their rules. And if you ever think of leaving, the absence of a strong support system makes the prospect feel terrifying and impossible. It's not just loneliness, it's a deliberate dismantling of your safety net, leaving you suspended in a world where they are your only anchor and your only jailer. Overloading with information. Overloading with information is a psychological manipulation tactic that buries you under an avalanche of details, facts, figures, and arguments until your ability to think clearly collapses. The goal is not to inform you, it's to overwhelm your mental bandwidth so thoroughly that you either shut down, give up, or blindly accept whatever the manipulator wants you to believe. It's the mental equivalent of trying to drink from a fire hose. You're so busy trying to keep up that you stop questioning the source. This works because the human brain has limits on how much information it can process at once. When we are overloaded, our decision-making deteriorates, our critical thinking weakens, and we become more susceptible to suggestions. Manipulators exploit this by speaking rapidly, throwing in jargon, citing endless statistics, or presenting multiple arguments at once. By the time you've processed the first point, they've already moved on to the fifth, making it impossible to keep up. In sales, this might be the fast-talking pitchman who bombards you with benefits until you nod just to end the onslaught. In relationships, it could be an argument where the other person floods you with past grievances, half-truths, and emotional accusations until you apologize for things you don't even remember. In politics, it's the endless spin of talking points that leave people too mentally exhausted to challenge the narrative. The overload is deliberate. It's not meant to enlighten, but to confuse. And in that confusion, you're far more likely to surrender your judgment and let them think for you, mistaking mental fatigue for agreement. Creating urgency artificially is a manipulative tactic designed to hijack your decision-making by making you believe that time is slipping away, that if you don't act now, you'll lose something forever. It's not about giving you enough space to think. It's about flooding you with fear and adrenaline so you bypass logic and leap straight into action. This technique thrives on manufacturing pressure, often through false deadlines, limited time offers, or exaggerated threats that make you feel cornered. Humans are wired to react to scarcity. In our evolutionary past, hesitation could mean missing out on vital resources. A manipulator exploits this primal wiring, creating the illusion that an opportunity is vanishing or a danger is closing in. They might tell you a deal ends tonight when it doesn't, that someone else is ready to take what could be yours, or that your inaction will lead to irreversible loss. The goal is not to inform you, it's to make you panic. Under this pressure, your rational mind takes a back seat. You stop weighing pros and cons, stop asking questions, and instead act to relieve the unbearable tension of, what if I miss out? This is why scams, high-pressure sales, and toxic relationships often rely on this trick. It traps you in a heightened emotional state where obedience feels safer than hesitation. The cruel brilliance of this tactic is that once the urgency has worked, the manipulator doesn't need it to be real. By the time you realize the clock was never ticking, you've already made the choice they wanted, often sacrificing far more than you ever would have if you'd had the time to truly think. Future faking. Future faking is a seductive form of manipulation, where someone makes grand promises about a beautiful future they have no real intention of delivering. It's the dangling of a dream just out of reach. Marriage, a house together, a dream job, a shared business, used not to inspire, but to control. This tactic works because it taps into hope, and hope is one of the strongest forces in human psychology. When someone paints vivid pictures of a future you desperately want, your emotions can drown out your logic. The manipulator becomes an architect of fantasy, describing every detail so convincingly that you can almost feel it. They talk about trips you'll take, milestones you'll celebrate, the life you'll build. You start to see them as your partner in destiny, investing more of your time, trust, and energy into the relationship or the deal because you believe you're moving towards something extraordinary. But future faking is not about building, it's about binding. These promises act as an emotional leash, keeping you attached and patient while they take what they want in the present. When you start noticing delays, excuses, or shifting timelines, they dangle an even bigger promise to keep you hooked. The cruelty of future faking lies in its theft of your time and emotional energy. You rearrange your life, make sacrifices, and endure present disappointments, all in the belief that the payoff will come. But the future never arrives, and by the time you realize the dream was a mirage, they've already extracted the loyalty, love, or resources they were after, leaving you with nothing but the echo of promises that were never real. Negging to lower self-esteem. Negging is a sly, underhanded tactic that disguises insult as humor, teasing, or even a backhanded compliment, all with the goal of subtly lowering your self-esteem. It's not a blatant attack. It's a small crack in your confidence, designed to make you feel just uncertain enough about yourself that you start seeking the manipulator's approval. It might sound like, "You'd be really pretty if you wore less makeup," or "Wow, you're actually smarter than I thought." These remarks plant seeds of doubt, leaving you wondering if you aren't quite good enough as you are. And because they're delivered with a smirk, a laugh, or a casual shrug, challenging them can make you seem overly sensitive or unable to take a joke. That's part of the trap. You're made to feel that your discomfort is the problem, not their disrespect. The psychological impact is powerful. Even small slights can chip away at self-worth, especially when they come from someone whose opinion you value. Over time, these micro-attacks accumulate, reshaping how you see yourself. Once your confidence dips, you may unconsciously start working harder to win their validation, dressing differently, changing how you speak, agreeing with them more often, just to avoid the sting of another jab. Negging works because it shifts the balance of power. The manipulator positions themselves as the one whose approval you need, while you begin to question whether you truly measure up. And in chasing their approval, you forget the truth. They're not elevating you. They're quietly dismantling you piece by piece until you believe you're lucky to have their attention at all. False consensus effect. The false consensus effect is a psychological manipulation that plays on our deep desire to belong and to believe we see the world the same way others do. It works by making you think that everyone shares a certain belief, behavior, or opinion, whether or not it's true. The manipulator subtly or blatantly convinces you that their perspective is the norm, and if you disagree, you're not just opposing them, you're isolating yourself from the majority. Humans are social creatures, hardwired to seek acceptance and avoid rejection. The idea that we might be alone in our views creates discomfort and fear of social exclusion. Manipulators weaponize this by framing their stance as the popular, widely accepted one, often saying things like, "Everybody thinks this," "No one disagrees with me," or "That's just how people feel." Even without proof, repetition and confidence can make it feel true. In the workplace, this might look like a boss saying, "The whole team agrees with this decision," even if they've only spoken to a few people. In relationships, it could be a partner insisting, "Any reasonable person would react this way," making you doubt your feelings. In politics, it's the constant framing of opinions as what the public wants, whether or not the data supports it. The danger is subtle. When you believe you're in the minority, you're more likely to conform, silence your objections, and adopt behaviors you might otherwise reject. The false consensus effect doesn't just bend your choices, it reshapes your reality, making you align with a majority that may never have existed at all. Repetition for belief implantation. Repetition for belief implantation is the subtle yet relentless process of feeding a message into your mind so many times that it begins to feel undeniably true, regardless of whether it's backed by evidence. It works because the human brain is wired to equate familiarity with truth. The more often we hear something, the less likely we are to question it. Over time, the words stop sounding like an opinion and start sounding like reality. A manipulator using this tactic doesn't rely on a single convincing argument. Instead, they drip feed the same phrase, the same idea, the same accusation until it becomes a fixture in your mental landscape. You're too sensitive. No one else would put up with you. This is the only way. At first, you might argue, but the repetition wears you down. The brain craves cognitive ease, and familiar ideas are easier to accept than to challenge repeatedly. This is the same principle used in propaganda, advertising, and cult indoctrination. It's not the complexity of the message that matters, but its persistence. The more you hear it, the more it bypasses your defenses, embedding itself deep enough to feel like your own thought. In relationships, repetition can rewrite your self-image entirely. A partner who tells you daily that you're incapable, unlovable, or lucky, they tolerate you, plants seeds that, over time, grow into unshakable beliefs, and once you've accepted their narrative, they no longer need to convince you. You'll do the convincing yourself, defending their lies as if they were your own truth. Conditional affection. Conditional affection is the art of making love, warmth, and approval into a reward instead of a given, turning something that should be freely given into a powerful tool of control. At first, the affection may feel genuine, smiles, praise, touch, kindness, but soon you realize it only flows when you behave exactly how they want. Any deviation from their expectations is met with coldness, criticism, or withdrawal, teaching you to shape yourself to fit their desires, just to feel cared for again. This tactic is so effective because it plays on the most primal human need, the need to be loved and accepted. When affection is withheld, it doesn't just feel disappointing, it feels like survival is at stake. You begin to see their approval as the measure of your worth, bending your boundaries and silencing your needs to avoid the pain of losing it. Conditional affection can be subtle. A partner might shower you with love when you agree with them, but grow distant when you speak up. A parent may beam with pride only when you achieve their definition of success. A boss may praise you only when you go above and beyond, making you fear doing just enough. Over time, you're trained like a puppet to perform for the reward, even if it destroys your sense of self. The real cruelty is that it's never truly about love, it's about control. You learn to chase their approval like oxygen, always hoping the next time you've earned it, they'll finally keep it coming. But they never do, and that's exactly the point. Identity erosion. Identity erosion is a slow, corrosive process where a manipulator systematically dismantles who you are, your values, your tastes, your beliefs, your boundaries, until the person you once knew as you feels like a distant memory. It doesn't happen in one explosive moment. It happens drip by drip, in ways so subtle that you barely notice the change until you look back and realize you've been rewritten. It often begins with small, seemingly harmless suggestions. You don't really like that music, do you? Or, that hobby is kind of a waste of time. Over time, these suggestions become corrections, then criticisms, and eventually, directives. They challenge your opinions, dismiss your dreams, and question your decisions so often that you start deferring to theirs, not because you agree, but because it feels easier than defending yourself every time. The danger is that the erosion feels like adaptation. You tell yourself you're just compromising or growing together, but in reality, you're shedding parts of yourself to fit into the mold they've created. One day you realize you've stopped wearing certain clothes, stopped speaking up about certain topics, stopped seeing certain people, not because you wanted to, but because somewhere along the way you were trained to believe those parts of you didn't matter. Identity erosion leaves you feeling hollow, dependent, and unsure of your own desires. You no longer trust your instincts because they've been overridden so many times, and that's exactly the manipulator's goal, to strip away your independence until you become a blank canvas they can paint over with their own design, leaving you unrecognizable, even to yourself. Emotional hot-cold cycles. Emotional hot-cold cycles are a form of psychological manipulation that keep you trapped in a dizzying loop of craving and confusion. The manipulator alternates between warmth, affection, and attention, the hot, and distance, indifference, or cruelty, the cold. This unpredictable shift creates a deep emotional dependency, as you begin chasing the hot moments with the same desperation as an addict chasing their next high. The power of this technique lies in its unpredictability. When affection and kindness are consistent, we feel secure, but when they're given sporadically, they become more addictive. Your brain starts associating the hot moments with relief, joy, and self-worth, while the cold moments trigger anxiety, self-doubt, and fear of abandonment. This creates a vicious cycle. The worse the cold feels, the more intoxicating the hot becomes. In romantic relationships, it might look like a partner showering you with love one week, then pulling away without explanation the next. In friendships, it's the friend who alternates between being your biggest supporter and disappearing when you need them most. In the workplace, it could be a boss who praises you publicly one day and humiliates you the next. Over time, you start to blame yourself for the cold phases, believing you must have done something wrong to lose their warmth. You become hypervigilant, adjusting your behavior in endless ways to try to earn the good version of them back. And that's the trap. The manipulator conditions you to accept their inconsistency, training you to fight for scraps of affection while tolerating the emotional whiplash that's slowly breaking you down. Covert intimidation. Covert intimidation is the quiet threat that slithers under your skin, a form of manipulation that doesn't scream or slam doors, but still makes you feel small, cornered, and powerless. It's the lingering stare that says more than words ever could, the offhand remark laced with just enough menace to make your stomach knot, the calculated pause before a sentence that leaves you wondering what will happen if you don't comply. Unlike open aggression, covert intimidation thrives on ambiguity. The manipulator doesn't need to raise their voice or issue a direct threat. They hint, they imply, they let your imagination do the work of scaring you into submission. Humans are wired to anticipate danger, and when fear is planted without being named, the mind fills in the blanks with the worst possible scenarios. That uncertainty is its power. They might smile while warning you, wrap a threat inside a joke, or make casual references to what has happened to people who didn't cooperate. These subtle cues bypass your logical defenses because they're not overt enough to call out without seeming paranoid, but they're potent enough to change your behavior. The effect is psychological handcuffs. You start policing your own actions, avoiding anything that might trigger the implied consequence. You might comply without being asked directly, just to keep that undercurrent of danger from rising. And all the while, the manipulator maintains plausible deniability, pretending innocence while knowing they've successfully made fear your silent companion. Passive-aggressive sabotage. Passive-aggressive sabotage is the silent dagger of manipulation. Harm disguised as harmlessness, betrayal masked by politeness. It's when someone undermines you indirectly, cloaking hostility in a smile, delaying help with a "sorry, I forgot," or twisting support into subtle obstruction. They avoid open confrontation, preferring quiet acts of resistance that leave you questioning whether they're even intentional, until the damage piles up and you're left picking through the wreckage. This tactic thrives on plausible deniability. If you call it out, they can feign innocence. "Oh, I didn't realize. I was just trying to help." They miss deadlines, accidentally misplace important information, or give advice that sets you up for failure. The genius of passive-aggressive sabotage is that it destabilizes you without giving you a clear enemy to fight. Instead of a direct attack, you face a fog of tiny setbacks, each one too small to prove malicious on its own, but devastating in accumulation. In personal relationships, this might look like a partner forgetting something important to you after a disagreement, or giving half-hearted effort toward your goals so they quietly fall apart. In the workplace, it could mean a colleague agreeing to help but dragging their feet until opportunities pass, making you look incompetent. The emotional toll is corrosive because you're never sure if you're imagining it. You start double-checking everything, working twice as hard and carrying the mental load they've quietly dropped in your lap. And the more you exhaust yourself trying to compensate, the more they get exactly what they wanted. You weaken, frustrated, and too drained to realize you've been at war with a ghost. Overpromising and underdelivering, deliberately overpromising and underdelivering deliberately, is a manipulative tactic where someone paints grand, glittering visions of what they will give, do, or become, fully intending never to follow through. The promises are not just words, they are carefully crafted hooks designed to ignite hope, trust, and excitement in you. They dangle a future so vivid you can almost taste it, making you invest your time, energy, and emotions into a reality that doesn't exist. The manipulator knows the power of anticipation. They talk about the trips you'll take, the opportunities they'll secure for you, the ways they'll be better or make it up to you. These promises create emotional highs that bond you to them as you imagine the life or relationship they've painted. But when the time comes to deliver, they offer excuses, delays, or simply let the promise fade into nothing. What makes this tactic so insidious is its cyclical nature. After the disappointment, they often make new, even grander promises to reignite your hope. Each time, you convince yourself that this time will be different, because to admit it won't be is to face the crushing truth that you've been deceived. This repeated pattern keeps you hooked in a loop of expectation and letdown, eroding your standards and training you to accept less than you deserve. And by the time you recognize the pattern, you've already invested so much into the dream they sold you that walking away feels like losing everything you were promised, even though those promises were never real to begin with. Minimizing others' concerns. Minimizing others' concerns is a subtle yet deeply corrosive form of manipulation that invalidates your feelings, experiences, and struggles by making them seem insignificant or exaggerated. At its core, it's the act of downplaying your pain or challenges in a way that makes you doubt your own emotional reality. The manipulator's goal isn't to comfort you, it's to silence you, shut down the conversation, and maintain control. It often comes disguised as calm logic, light humor, or helpful perspective. You might open up about something that's been weighing heavily on you, only to hear, "You're overreacting. It's not that big of a deal," or "Other people have it worse." These phrases sound harmless, even rational, but they carry a devastating undercurrent. Your feelings don't matter. The effect is subtle but powerful. Over time, you begin to censor yourself, convinced that you're too sensitive or dramatic. You start second-guessing whether your struggles are valid, which erodes your confidence and makes you less likely to advocate for your needs. In relationships, this tactic can keep you trapped, because if your pain is always dismissed, it becomes nearly impossible to demand change. In workplaces, minimizing concerns can silence legitimate grievances, creating a culture where problems fester while employees are told to toughen up. In families, it can pass as teaching resilience, but in reality, it breeds emotional neglect. The manipulator gains power not by shouting you down, but by shrinking your reality until it fits neatly into their version of events, where your needs are small, your voice is quiet, and your worth is measured by how little space you take up. Shifting blame constantly. Shifting blame constantly is the manipulator's escape hatch from accountability, a tactic designed to keep the spotlight off their own actions while planting the weight of fault squarely on your shoulders. No matter what goes wrong, an argument, a failure, a betrayal, they find a way to twist the narrative so you become the cause, the problem, the one who made them do it. Over time, this relentless deflection erodes your ability to trust your own judgment until you start apologizing for things you didn't even do. It begins subtly, with small reframes. "I wouldn't have yelled if you hadn't provoked me. If you were more supportive, I wouldn't be so stressed." Each shift chips away at your sense of reality, making you second-guess your role in events. The manipulator's goal isn't just to dodge guilt, it's to rewrite the truth so completely that you carry the emotional and moral burden for their behavior. This tactic is particularly powerful because humans are naturally introspective. When someone we care about accuses us, our first instinct is to examine ourselves. A skilled blame shifter exploits this reflex, making self-reflection spiral into self-condemnation. You end up defending yourself against accusations so distorted you can't even prove they're false because they're built on feelings and interpretations rather than facts. The constant weight of being at fault reshapes how you see yourself. You begin to believe you are clumsy with emotions, careless with words, perpetually in the wrong, and while you're busy fixing, apologizing, and absorbing their anger, they walk away spotless, shielded by the mess they convinced you was yours to clean. Reframing narratives. Reframing narratives is the psychological art of taking a story, especially one that exposes fault, guilt, or wrongdoing, and twisting it into a version that serves the manipulator's interests. It's not just about lying, it's about reshaping the entire context so that what was once clear becomes murky, and the villain emerges looking like the hero. With careful word choice and selective detail, they turn reality into a weapon they control. This tactic works because human memory and perception are shockingly malleable. Most people don't remember events like a recording. They remember them like a story, open to editing. A skilled manipulator exploits this by emphasizing certain details, downplaying others, and introducing new facts that subtly shift the moral center of the situation. Suddenly, the wrongdoing becomes a misunderstanding. Your justified reaction becomes overreacting, and their betrayal becomes something they were forced into. In relationships, they might recast a cruel remark as just a joke, making you seem humorless for taking it seriously. In the workplace, they might frame their failure to deliver as the result of your lack of communication. In family dynamics, they might spin past neglect as tough love, or even claim they were the ones suffering most. The danger lies in how convincing this can be. Over time, if you hear their version enough, you start doubting your own memory, wondering if maybe you did misinterpret everything. And once they control the narrative, they control the outcome, because the truth doesn't matter as much as the story people believe. In their hands, the past isn't fixed, it's clay, and they'll mold it until you can't even recognize it anymore. Playing dumb strategically is a calculated manipulation tactic where someone pretends to lack knowledge, understanding, or capability, not out of ignorance, but as a way to gain an advantage. It's not genuine confusion. It's a performance designed to disarm, avoid responsibility, or lure you into doing the heavy lifting for them. By appearing harmless, clueless, or incapable, they lower your guard and shift the burden of action onto you. A manipulator might feign not knowing how to complete a task, so you'll do it for them. They might pretend they don't understand a problem to avoid taking accountability. In more subtle forms, they'll act naive in emotionally charged situations, as if they can't possibly comprehend why you're upset, forcing you to explain, justify, and even doubt your own feelings. The more you explain, the more power you unknowingly give them, because they control the pace and direction of the conversation. This tactic works because people are instinctively inclined to help those they perceive as less capable. It also shields the manipulator from blame. They can't be held accountable if they didn't know any better. Over time, playing dumb can be used to mask competence, dodge commitments, or manipulate others into underestimating them. The emotional toll comes when you realize you've been doing the work, making the decisions, and carrying the responsibility while they've maintained control from the shadows. By the time you catch on, you've not only been drained, you've also been maneuvered into believing that without you, nothing would function, which is exactly the position they wanted you in from the start. Controlling through finances. Controlling through finances is a form of psychological and practical domination that traps people in invisible chains. It happens when one person gains control over the flow of money, income, expenses, savings, and uses that power to dictate the other person's choices, freedom, and even sense of self-worth. It's not just about money. It's about stripping away independence, forcing dependence so complete that escape feels impossible. The manipulator may control all bank accounts, demand receipts for every purchase, or approve what you can and cannot spend on. They might withhold funds for basic needs, give allowances like you're a child, or sabotage your ability to earn money by discouraging or forbidding work. Sometimes they'll even dangle financial help as a reward for compliance and yank it away the moment you assert yourself. This works because money is survival. Without it, leaving becomes harder, choices shrink, and your autonomy erodes. Over time, you start adjusting your behavior to avoid having funds cut off. You might tolerate mistreatment, stay silent about abuse, or give up your goals just to keep the little financial stability you have. In relationships, financial control can masquerade as taking care of you or being the responsible one. In families, it might be framed as protecting someone from bad spending habits, but the truth is darker. They've built a system where your life is tethered to their approval. The cruel brilliance of financial control is that it doesn't just limit what you can buy, it limits what you can dream, plan, and choose. It's not just a lock on your wallet, it's a lock on your freedom. Overwhelming with kindness. Overwhelming with kindness is a disarming form of manipulation that feels like affection, but works like a net, soft, comforting, and almost impossible to notice until it's closed around you. At first, it appears as generosity beyond measure, constant favors, lavish gifts, unending compliments, and a willingness to drop everything to be there for you. It's intoxicating because humans are wired to trust those who treat us well, to believe such warmth must come from a place of pure goodwill. But here, kindness is not given freely. It's an investment with strings hidden in the folds. The manipulator showers you with so much positive attention that it bypasses your skepticism. You stop questioning their motives because it feels rude, even ungrateful, to doubt someone who's been so good to you. But this flood of kindness often carries an unspoken debt. Slowly, subtly, the balance of power shifts. You begin to feel you owe them. When the asks start, they are framed as small favors, reasonable given all they've done. But if you hesitate, the kindness can turn cold, the warmth replaced by guilt-inducing reminders of everything they've given you. You find yourself saying yes, not because you want to, but because saying no feels like betrayal. The genius of this tactic is that it weaponizes one of the most beautiful human qualities, gratitude, against you. It makes compliance feel like reciprocity and resistance feel like cruelty. By the time you realize the kindness was a tool, not a gift, you've been trained to prioritize their needs over your own, afraid to be seen as ungrateful or undeserving. Withholding key information. Withholding key information is a manipulation tactic built on the power of omission, where the most dangerous lies aren't spoken, they're simply left unsaid. It's the deliberate decision to keep you in the dark about facts that could change your choices, your trust, or your perception of the person withholding them. This isn't about forgetting to tell you something. It's about controlling the flow of truth, so you can only make decisions based on what they want you to know. The brilliance of this tactic is its subtlety. They can always claim innocence. I never lied to you. Technically, that's true, but they also never gave you the full picture. They might tell you about the benefits of an opportunity without mentioning the risks, share a sanitized version of their past that hides deal-breaking details, or fail to disclose intentions that would make you think twice. By controlling the information you have, they control your reality. If you don't know certain facts, you can't prepare for them, question them, or make choices to avoid them. This creates a dangerous imbalance of power. One person holds the truth, while the other makes decisions blindfolded. In relationships, this can mean hiding ongoing contact with an ex, failing to mention debts, or leaving out actions that would reveal betrayal. In professional settings, it can mean omitting deadlines, withholding full instructions, or keeping you unaware of critical changes until it's too late to respond. The cruelty lies in the intent. They don't have to change your mind if they can simply limit what your mind has to work with. And by the time the missing truth finally surfaces, the damage has already been done. Strategic use of flattery. The strategic use of flattery is not about genuine admiration. It's about wielding praise like a scalpel to cut into your defenses. When done with manipulative intent, flattery becomes a tool to influence, distract, and gain access to your trust. It's not the casual compliment that makes you smile. It's the targeted, calculated kind that hits the exact insecurities or desires you carry, making you feel seen in a way that disarms you completely. A manipulator studies you closely, learning what you wish people notice, your work ethic, your intelligence, your creativity, your style, and then showers you with compliments that feel almost eerily specific. You're the only one who really understands this, or no one else could pull this off the way you do. These words are addictive because they validate the very parts of you that crave recognition. The moment you feel uniquely valued, your guard drops, making you far more receptive to their requests or influence. Flattery works on a psychological level because it feeds both your ego and your longing for connection. Even when you suspect it might be exaggerated, part of you wants to believe it's genuine, and the manipulator counts on that. They wrap their agenda inside the sweetness of their praise, so by the time you see the strings, you've already been pulled into their orbit. This tactic doesn't just make you like them, it makes you want to keep earning their admiration, and in chasing that next hit of validation, you may find yourself giving more, agreeing more, and questioning less, all while they quietly steer you exactly where they want you to go. Creating false dilemmas. Creating false dilemmas is a manipulative tactic that forces you into making a choice between two extremes, both of which are designed to serve the manipulator's agenda, while hiding the fact that other options exist. It's the illusion of choice, crafted to make you feel trapped. The manipulator presents the situation as if only two paths are possible, one they want you to reject and one they want you to take. By framing the conversation this way, they cut off your ability to think beyond their narrow, self-serving narrative. This works because human decision-making is heavily influenced by framing. When we believe the options are limited, we instinctively focus on choosing the lesser evil instead of questioning the premise altogether. The manipulator uses urgent language, moral pressure, or fear to make you feel as though a decision must be made immediately, and that choosing anything outside their presented options is foolish, dangerous, or impossible. In relationships, it might sound like, either you agree with me or you don't care about us. In the workplace, it could be, we either do it my way or the whole project fails. In politics, it's often, you're either with us or against us. Each scenario pushes you into a mental corner where the only reasonable choice is the one that benefits them. The power of the false dilemma lies in its ability to control your perception before you even start thinking. It doesn't just manipulate your decision, it manipulates the very boundaries of what you believe is possible. Inducing learned helplessness. Inducing learned helplessness is a psychological breaking process that strips you of the belief that your actions can change your circumstances. It's not about controlling you through force. It's about convincing you that resistance is pointless, that no matter what you do, the outcome will always be the same: failure, pain, or rejection. Over time, you stop trying altogether, surrendering your power willingly, because you've been conditioned to believe you never had any. This tactic unfolds slowly. The manipulator places you in situations where your efforts are repeatedly met with dismissal, punishment, or sabotage. You try to fix the relationship, meet their expectations, or assert your boundaries, only to be met with criticism, mockery, or more impossible demands. Each failed attempt chips away at your sense of agency. The emotional impact is devastating. At first, you push harder, thinking you can earn their approval if you just work more, love more, give more. But the rules keep changing, the goalposts keep moving, and nothing you do ever seems good enough. Eventually, your spirit begins to fracture. You start telling yourself, why bother? It won't make a difference. This is the moment the manipulator wants, the moment you stop fighting back. In this state, they can shape your behavior effortlessly because your compliance no longer requires threats or persuasion. You become passive, dependent, and emotionally numb, accepting whatever is handed to you simply because you've been trained to believe you have no control. It's not just obedience. They've rewritten the very story you tell yourself about your own strength. Deliberately fostering dependency. Deliberately fostering dependency is a calculated manipulation where someone methodically erodes your ability to function independently, ensuring you rely on them for emotional stability, decision-making, financial security, or even basic needs. It's not about helping you. It's about binding you. They present themselves as your rock, your savior, the one who has your back, while quietly dismantling your self-reliance piece by piece until you believe you can't survive without them. At first, it feels like love or support. They step in to solve problems, make choices for you, handle the difficult parts of life. You feel cared for until you realize you've stopped making decisions without their input, stopped trusting your own judgment, and started looking to them for permission instead of advice. They may discourage you from pursuing certain friendships, jobs, or opportunities, all under the guise of protecting you, but really to cut off alternatives to their influence. Financial dependency is one of their sharpest tools. They might take control of the money to help you manage it, or subtly pressure you to give up your income so you can focus on what matters. Emotional dependency is equally potent. They become the only source of comfort after they've isolated you from others, ensuring you turn to them for validation, reassurance, and guidance in every moment of doubt. The true cruelty of this tactic is that it masquerades as care while hollowing you out from within. By the time you see the bars of the cage, you've already been trained to believe they're the only one holding the key, and that you wouldn't even know how to live without them. Setting impossible standards. Setting impossible standards is a ruthless manipulation tactic where the bar is placed so high that no matter how hard you try, you can never truly reach it. It's a psychological chokehold designed to keep you in a perpetual state of striving, self-doubt, and dependence on the manipulator's approval, a state where you are always almost good enough, but never quite there. It might appear as relentless criticism disguised as pushing you to be your best, or constant comparisons to people who seem unattainably perfect. In relationships, it could be the partner who praises you only when you meet some unrealistic expectation, then moves the goalpost the moment you get close. In the workplace, it's the boss who assigns tasks with impossible deadlines, then questions your competence when you can't meet them. The emotional impact is profound. When success is made unattainable, failure becomes your default reality, and you begin to internalize the belief that you are inherently lacking. This creates a dangerous cycle where you work harder, sacrifice more, and endure more criticism, hoping for the approval that never truly comes. Each brief moment of recognition feels intoxicating, but it's fleeting by design, just enough to keep you hooked. Over time, your identity becomes tied to chasing their standard, not your own. You measure your worth through their impossible lens, ignoring your actual achievements, and the cruel truth is, the manipulator never intended for you to succeed, because if you did, their control over you would shatter. Keeping you just out of reach isn't a side effect. It's the point. Selective memory claims. Selective memory claims are a subtle but potent manipulation tactic where a person pretends to remember only certain details, always the ones that serve their version of events, while conveniently forgetting anything that might hold them accountable. It's a way of rewriting reality in real time, turning shared history into a tool for control. They recall moments that justify their actions with perfect clarity, yet act bewildered or doubtful when confronted with evidence that contradicts them. This works because memory is already fallible, and when someone speaks with absolute confidence, it can make you question your own recollection. They might insist, "I never said that," or "That's not how it happened," in a tone so certain that you begin to doubt yourself. Over time, the constant denial of your version of events chips away at your trust in your own mind, leaving their selective truth as the only one standing. In relationships, it may look like a partner remembering every time you made a mistake, but conveniently forgetting the ways they hurt you. In the workplace is the boss who recalls every missed deadline but can't remember the times you worked late to save a project. In family disputes, it's the relative who clings to an old grudge but erases the context that led to it. The danger is that selective memory claims don't just distort individual moments, they reshape the entire narrative. By controlling the past, the manipulator controls the present conversation and future decisions, making you live in a version of history where they are always right and you are always wrong. Planting false memories. Planting false memories is one of the most chilling forms of psychological manipulation because it doesn't just twist your perception, it rewrites your past. It's the act of subtly feeding you fabricated details, altered events, or entirely fictional scenarios until your mind accepts them as truth. Over time, you can be made to remember things that never happened, or to recall real events in a distorted way that benefits the manipulator. This works because human memory is not a flawless recording. It's fragile, malleable, and deeply influenced by suggestion. A manipulator might seed a false memory with an offhand comment. "Remember when you said that hurtful thing at dinner?" Even if you never did, they may repeat it casually in different contexts, adding small details each time until the image in your mind becomes vivid and familiar. Eventually, your brain can't distinguish between actual memories and the ones they've planted. This tactic is especially potent when wrapped in emotional triggers. They might frame the false memory around guilt, shame, or fear, making you more likely to accept it to avoid seeming like a liar or a bad person. They may enlist others to confirm it, further cementing the illusion. In relationships, this can be used to make you believe you've been cruel or unreliable. In legal or professional settings, it can destroy reputations by manufacturing a false history. The most dangerous part, once a false memory takes root, it can permanently alter how you see yourself, your past, and even your present relationships. In their hands, your own mind becomes the perfect prison, one you help reinforce brick by brick without ever realizing the blueprint was never yours. Pathologizing dissent. Pathologizing dissent is a sinister form of psychological control where disagreement is twisted into a sign of mental, emotional, or moral defect. Instead of engaging with your concerns or opposing views, the manipulator frames your resistance as proof that something is wrong with you. You're too sensitive, paranoid, unstable, or angry all the time. By turning your dissent into a symptom, they avoid addressing the truth and instead put you on the defensive. This tactic is devastating because it weaponizes your own desire to be seen as rational and sane. When someone tells you your perspective is invalid because you're overreacting or imagining things, it creates a deep self-doubt. You start questioning whether your feelings are justified, whether your memory is accurate, whether your perception is trustworthy. the conversation shifts away from the issue itself and becomes about your supposed flaws or mental state. Pathologizing dissent is common in toxic relationships, authoritarian workplaces, and even cult-like environments. Leaders or partners use it to delegitimize criticism and maintain absolute control, because if they can convince you and others that your disagreement stems from something wrong with you, then they never have to confront the validity of your point. The cruelty of this tactic is that it isolates you. Others may begin to view you through the manipulator's lens, treating your concerns as overblown or irrational. And once you start believing that narrative yourself, your ability to resist, speak up, or even trust your own instincts begins to crumble. You're left trapped, not just silenced, but convinced that maybe you should be. Twisting words to change meaning. Twisting words to change meaning is a psychological manipulation tactic that weaponizes your own language against you. It happens when someone deliberately distorts what you've said, altering context, exaggerating, or stripping away nuance until your original message becomes something entirely different, often something damaging or self-incriminating. It's not about misunderstanding. It's about intentional misrepresentation to gain the upper hand in an argument, shift blame, or control the narrative. This tactic works because humans instinctively feel the need to defend themselves when accused or misrepresented. The manipulator counts on this, knowing that the moment you start clarifying or justifying your words, the conversation shifts away from their behavior and onto your mistake. They might claim you said something you didn't, interpret your words in the worst possible way, or take a small comment out of context to make you appear cruel, selfish, or irrational. In relationships, it could look like you saying, "I need more space," and them twisting it into, "You just admitted you don't care about me." At work, you might point out a problem, only for your boss to claim you called the entire team incompetent. In friendships, you might express a boundary, and they'll spin it as you being controlling or unreasonable. Over time, twisting your words erodes your confidence in communicating at all. You start second-guessing every sentence, fearing it will be used against you. And that's the trap. By making you afraid to speak, they not only control the conversation, but they control the very way you think about your right to be heard. Pretending ignorance of harm done. Pretending ignorance of harm done is a manipulation tactic that hides cruelty behind a mask of innocence. The manipulator acts as though they have no idea their actions hurt you, even when the evidence is undeniable. They feign confusion, claim they didn't mean it like that, or suggest you're reading too much into it. By doing so, they dodge accountability while subtly making you feel overly sensitive, unreasonable, or even guilty for bringing it up. This tactic is effective because it exploits empathy. Most people want to believe that harm was unintentional, so when someone insists they didn't know, you're more inclined to give them the benefit of the doubt. The manipulator uses this to reset the emotional balance in their favor, avoiding consequences while keeping you stuck in the role of the overreactor. In relationships, it might be the partner who makes a cruel joke at your expense, then claims they were just kidding when you express hurt. In families, it could be a parent who repeatedly crosses boundaries, then acts baffled when confronted. In the workplace, it's the colleague who undermines you and later says they didn't realize it would affect your reputation. Over time, pretending ignorance forces you into the exhausting position of having to repeatedly explain why something was harmful. You begin to doubt whether speaking up is worth it, which gives them a free pass to keep doing it. And the most chilling part, they often know exactly what they've done. The act of ignorance isn't weakness. It's a strategy to make you question whether you have the right to hold them accountable at all. Using euphemisms to hide truth. Using euphemisms to hide truth is the subtle art of dressing ugly realities in soft, harmless-sounding words so the sting of truth is dulled or disappears entirely. It's not an outright lie, it's a linguistic disguise. The manipulator replaces harsh, emotionally triggering terms with vague or pleasant ones, making serious issues seem minor, dangerous acts seem acceptable, and outright wrongdoing feel almost respectable. This works because words are not just labels, they shape how we think and feel. When you call layoffs a strategic realignment, it sounds less like people losing their livelihoods and more like an exciting corporate move. When torture becomes enhanced interrogation, moral outrage is replaced with sterile detachment. The brain reacts less intensely to softer language, which makes you more likely to accept things you would otherwise resist. In relationships, euphemisms can mask cruelty. "We just had a misunderstanding" may be code for a screaming fight. "I'm just being honest" can cloak verbal abuse. Needing space might actually mean abandonment. The manipulator carefully chooses language that reframes harmful actions into something palatable, avoiding confrontation while still getting what they want. The danger is that euphemisms don't just obscure facts, they shape perception. Over time, hearing softened language repeatedly can normalize behavior that should cause alarm. By the time you see through the wordplay, your sense of reality has already been softened too, and that's the goal, to keep you calm, compliant, and far from the raw truth that might spark you to push back. In their world, language isn't just communication, it's camouflage. Giving ultimatums. Giving ultimatums is a high-pressure manipulation tactic that forces you into a corner where every path leads to the manipulator's advantage. It's presented as a choice, but in reality, it's a threat wrapped in decision-making. Do what they want or face consequences that are deliberately framed to trigger fear, guilt, or loss. The manipulator knows that when someone feels trapped, they're more likely to surrender just to escape the tension. Ultimatums are rarely about healthy boundaries. They're about control. "If you don't change, I'm leaving. If you talk to them again, we're done. Either you're with me or you're against me." These statements leave no room for discussion, compromise, or mutual understanding. Instead, they create a false sense of urgency, pushing you to comply before you've had the chance to think critically about whether the demand is fair or even rational. The psychological impact is immediate and visceral. Your survival instincts kick in, flooding you with anxiety at the thought of losing love, stability, or security. The manipulator exploits this fear to bypass reason, making you act from panic instead of choice. Over time, repeated ultimatums condition you to preemptively avoid behaviors, people, or decisions that might provoke another threat, even when those choices are healthy or necessary for you. The cruel brilliance of ultimatums is that they disguise domination as giving you control. On paper, you are free to choose. In reality, the manipulator has rigged the options so that the cost of defiance feels unbearable, and so piece by piece, you learn to choose them, until one day you forget there was ever another choice at all. Weaponizing secrets. Weaponizing secrets is one of the most intimate and devastating forms of manipulation because it exploits the deepest trust you've given someone. It begins when you open up, sharing vulnerabilities, fears, past mistakes, or personal struggles, believing you're safe in their confidence. At first, they seem to treasure this trust, using it to deepen your connection, but over time, those secrets become ammunition stored away for moments when they want leverage, obedience, or revenge. This works because secrets carry emotional weight. The manipulator knows that the thought of your private truths being exposed can create intense fear, shame, or social fallout. Even the possibility of them revealing something can keep you compliant, silenced, or bound to them. They may hint at your secret in conversations, drop suggestive comments to others, or outright threaten to expose you if you don't give them what they want. Sometimes the threat is subtle, a lingering reminder that they know things about you. In relationships, this could be a partner threatening to reveal embarrassing details to friends or family if you leave. In the workplace, it might be a colleague who's learned of a personal mistake and implies they could accidentally let it slip. In families, it's the relative who holds a piece of history over you and brings it up when they want to keep you in line. The danger is that weaponizing secrets doesn't just control your actions, it controls your sense of safety in the world. You start censoring yourself, shrinking your life, and bending to their will to protect yourself, all while the trust you once gave them becomes the very knife they hold to your throat. Strategic incompetence. Strategic incompetence is a calculated manipulation tactic where a person deliberately pretends to be incapable of performing a task or does it so poorly that someone else is forced to take over. It's not genuine inability. It's a performance designed to shift responsibility, avoid effort, or maintain control. By playing dumb, making repeated mistakes, or acting confused, the manipulator ensures the burden falls on you while they appear harmless, even well-meaning. This works because most people find it easier to do a task themselves than to repeatedly correct someone. The manipulator exploits this natural tendency, creating a dynamic where you gradually stop asking for help or delegating to them. Over time, their incompetence becomes the accepted norm, and you become the one carrying the extra load, whether at home, in relationships, or at work. In relationships, it might look like a partner who forgets how to do laundry correctly, leaving you to handle it every time. At work, it's the colleague who constantly botches reports until the team stops assigning them important tasks. In families, it can be the parent or sibling who consistently claims they don't know how to manage something basic, ensuring someone else picks up the slack. The genius of strategic incompetence is that it's hard to call out without looking petty or unfair. If you accuse them, they can claim they tried their best or that you're being too critical. But the truth is, every failed attempt is a calculated move to keep you overworked, overcommitted, and too tired to notice they've built an entire system where you do the work, and they reap the benefits. Moving the goalposts. Moving the goalposts is a manipulation tactic that keeps you in a perpetual state of striving, never succeeding. It happens when someone sets a target for you, an expectation, a condition, a promise, and just as you meet it, they shift the requirement. You think you've finally proven yourself, earned their trust, or secured the reward, but suddenly the bar is higher, the rules are different, and your achievement no longer counts. This tactic is devastating because it weaponizes hope and effort. You invest time, energy, and sometimes your very identity into meeting the standard they've set, only to be told it's not enough. And because you've already worked so hard, walking away feels impossible. You're too deep in the investment trap, desperate to finally win their approval or the promised outcome. In relationships, this can look like a partner promising more commitment once you work on yourself, only to find new flaws when you've done exactly that. In the workplace, it can mean a boss dangling a promotion that keeps getting delayed for one more project or a little more proof of your value. Even in family dynamics, parents may shift their praise so it's never quite within reach, leaving you constantly chasing validation. The cruelty lies in its endlessness. Every time you think you've arrived, the destination moves. You start believing that maybe the problem is you, that if you were just better, faster, smarter, you'd finally be enough. But the truth is, you're not meant to win. You're meant to keep running, because as long as the goalposts keep moving, they keep their control. Controlling the environment. Controlling the environment is a subtle yet suffocating form of manipulation where the physical, social, and even informational spaces around you are engineered to shape your thoughts, feelings, and behavior. It's not always about locking you in a room. It's about creating an atmosphere where every influence you encounter serves the manipulator's agenda, and every path you might take is quietly guided by their design. They might dictate where you go, who you see, and what you're exposed to, deciding which friends are good for you, which places are safe, and which sources of information you should trust. Sometimes it's done under the guise of care or protection. I just don't want you around those kinds of people, or that place isn't good for you. Other times, it's more overt, cutting off transportation, controlling finances, or flooding your space with their own opinions, values, and beliefs until they drown out your own. This tactic works because our surroundings heavily influence how we think and act. When your world is curated to reflect only one perspective, it becomes harder to question it. Without access to dissenting voices, new experiences, or independent resources, your reality shrinks until it fits neatly inside the boundaries they've drawn for you. Over time, you may stop seeking alternatives altogether, believing the environment you've been given is all there is. And that's the point. Once they control the space around you, they don't have to fight for your mind directly. The walls they've built, both visible and invisible, do the work for them, keeping you in a reality where their influence is constant and inescapable. Exploiting confirmation bias. Exploiting confirmation bias is a manipulation tactic that works by feeding you only the information that supports what you already believe, while carefully hiding or discrediting anything that might challenge it. Humans naturally seek patterns that confirm their existing views. It feels safe, validating, and comforting. A manipulator takes advantage of this by crafting a reality where every fact you encounter reinforces their narrative, making it feel undeniably true, even if it's built on lies. This works because confirmation bias is baked into how the human brain processes information. We notice, remember, and value data that agrees with us, and we dismiss or forget what doesn't. The manipulator doesn't need to convince you to abandon your beliefs. They only need to frame selective evidence in a way that makes you feel like you're discovering the truth yourself. They might present statistics without context, cherry-pick stories, or constantly point to examples that align with the conclusion they want you to hold. In relationships, this can look like a partner constantly highlighting times they were right or times you proved them correct, ignoring all instances where they were wrong. In the workplace, it could be a boss praising only the projects that align with their vision, while ignoring successful work that contradicts it. In politics, it's the endless cycle of echo chambers, where you're shown only the news, polls, and opinions that match your side. The danger is subtle but deadly. You become more certain of your beliefs while becoming blind to alternative perspectives. And the more certain you are, the easier it is for the manipulator to guide your choices without you ever realizing you've been led. Misdirection to avoid accountability. Misdirection to avoid accountability is a psychological sleight of hand where a person shifts focus away from their own actions to prevent facing consequences. Instead of addressing the harm they cause, they redirect the conversation to something else. Your flaws, unrelated issues, exaggerated distractions, anything that keeps the spotlight off their wrongdoing. It's not about solving the problem. It's about making sure the problem is no longer them. This tactic works because humans are naturally drawn to whatever seems urgent, emotional, or scandalous in the moment. The manipulator takes advantage of this by introducing a new topic or escalating a side issue until the original grievance fades into the background. They might suddenly bring up a past mistake you made, point to someone else's worst behavior, or create a fresh conflict that demands immediate attention. By the time emotions settle, the original issue has been buried under layers of deflection. In relationships, it could look like you confronting a partner about lying, and instead of answering, they accuse you of being controlling or dredge up something you did months ago. In the workplace, it's the coworker who derails a meeting about their missed deadline by loudly criticizing someone else's performance. In politics, it's the leader who dodges scandal by fueling outrage over an unrelated topic. The danger of misdirection is that it doesn't just dodge accountability, it reshapes reality in real time. You walk away frustrated, drained, and uncertain about what the conversation even started with. And that's the point. The manipulator wins not by proving themselves right, but by making sure no one remembers they were wrong in the first place. Using ambiguity for control. Using ambiguity for control is the deliberate act of keeping rules, expectations, and intentions vague so that power always stays in the manipulator's hands. It's not about clarity, it's about confusion. By refusing to be specific, they create a shifting landscape where you can never be entirely sure what's expected, what's allowed, or where you stand. This uncertainty forces you into a constant state of second guessing, making you easier to influence and harder to challenge. The brilliance of ambiguity is that it makes failure inevitable because the rules can change at any moment. A boss might give you an unclear project description, then criticize you for not delivering what they meant. A partner might say they want more effort without ever defining what that means, leaving you chasing a moving shadow of approval. If you confront them, they can always claim you misunderstood or overreacted, keeping you on the defensive. Ambiguity also provides cover for manipulation. They can commit to something without really committing, promising we'll see instead of yes, or using phrases like in the future without a timeline. This keeps you invested without guaranteeing anything in return. And when they break these vague promises, they can always say you read too much into it. The emotional toll is corrosive. You begin to overanalyze every word, every gesture, desperate to decode hidden meanings. You may even start policing your own behavior in ways that benefit them, without them having to ask. And that's the genius of it. In a fog of uncertainty, the one holding the flashlight decides what's real, what's right, and what's worth fighting for. Pretending moral superiority. Pretending moral superiority is a manipulation tactic where someone positions themselves as the ethical high ground, the righteous one, the virtuous one, so that any disagreement with them feels like a moral failing on your part. It's not about genuinely holding strong values. It's about weaponizing those values to shame, control, and silence you. When they speak, it's not just opinion. It's presented as the right thing, the only thing a good person could agree with. They may highlight their own integrity or selflessness while subtly or blatantly implying that you fall short. They frame your choices as selfish, immature, or harmful, while theirs are painted as noble sacrifices. This puts you in a no-win situation. Agree with them and submit to their control, or disagree and risk being cast as morally flawed, cruel, or uncaring. This tactic is especially powerful because most people want to see themselves as good and decent. The manipulator exploits that desire, using it to steer your behavior without ever having to make a direct demand. You might find yourself apologizing for choices you have every right to make, overcompensating to prove you're not the bad person they subtly suggest you are. Over time, their supposed moral high ground becomes a cage. Every action you take is weighed against the fear of being judged or shamed, and their values begin to override your own. The truth is, pretending moral superiority isn't about values at all. It's about power. And when someone controls the moral narrative, they don't just influence your choices, they redefine what you believe makes you worthy in the first place. Forced confessions. Forced confessions are a psychological weapon used to break down a person's sense of autonomy and rewrite the truth in the manipulator's favor. This tactic involves pressuring, intimidating, or emotionally cornering someone into admitting to something, whether or not it's true, until the victim begins to question their own innocence. The goal isn't justice or resolution, it's submission. The manipulator wants your agreement, your compliance, and your surrender, not the actual truth. This works because human beings are wired to seek relief from tension and conflict. When someone relentlessly accuses you, interrogates you, or floods you with emotional guilt, the mental strain becomes unbearable. Eventually, confessing, whether the accusation is real or not, feels like the only way to end the torment. The manipulator may yell, cry, withdraw affection, or use silence until you break. They might present fabricated evidence or twist past events until you feel cornered, doubting your own memory and judgment. In relationships, it can be a partner demanding you admit to feelings or actions you never had simply to stop the emotional punishment. In workplaces, it's a boss insisting you own up to a mistake you didn't make so they can avoid blame. In families, it's a parent pressuring a child to confess to misbehavior as a show of obedience, not truth. The damage of forced confessions goes beyond the moment. It rewires how you see yourself. Once you've spoken the words, even under pressure, a seed of doubt can take root. What if they're right? That's the manipulator's ultimate victory, making you carry a guilt that was never yours to begin with. Public shaming. Public shaming is a weaponized form of humiliation where a person uses the gaze of others as a tool to control, punish, or break you down. It works by dragging your mistakes, real, exaggerated, or entirely fabricated, into the open, ensuring that your embarrassment is amplified by the collective eyes of a group. The manipulator doesn't just want you to feel guilty, they want you to feel small, exposed, and powerless in front of an audience. This tactic is devastating because humans are hardwired to fear social rejection. For much of human history, being cast out by the group meant losing safety, resources, and survival. That primal fear still lingers in us today, making public humiliation feel like an existential threat. The manipulator exploits this fear to make you submit, comply, or retreat without a fight. In relationships, public shaming might be a partner mocking your insecurities in front of friends under the guise of just joking. In the workplace, it can be a boss calling you out in a meeting for a mistake instead of addressing it privately. In schools, it's the teacher who ridicules a student for not knowing the answer, knowing the sting will silence them for a long time. The power of public shaming lies in its lingering effect. Even after the moment passes, the memory festers, and you begin policing yourself to avoid future humiliation. This self-censorship gives the manipulator exactly what they want: control over your actions, thoughts, and voice, not through reason, but through the threat of turning your next misstep into a public spectacle. Divide and conquer tactics. Divide and conquer tactics are a ruthless form of manipulation that destroy unity by turning people against each other, ensuring the manipulator remains in control. It's the calculated act of sowing mistrust, jealousy, or rivalry between individuals or groups who might otherwise stand together. By keeping potential allies fractured, the manipulator eliminates the possibility of being challenged, questioned, or overpowered. This tactic works because human beings are social creatures who crave belonging, but we're also prone to insecurity and competition. The manipulator exploits these tendencies, whispering selective truths, half-lies, or outright fabrications to each side, ensuring everyone sees the other as a threat or obstacle. They may exaggerate someone's flaws, misquote conversations, or accidentally let slip that others are talking behind your back. Slowly, bonds weaken, suspicion grows, and people stop trusting one another. In workplaces, this can mean pitting employees against each other for promotions, making each believe the other is the boss's favorite. In families, it can mean favoring one child over another, creating decades-long resentments. In friendships or social circles, it might mean telling each person a slightly different version of events, so neither trusts the other's account. The genius and cruelty of divide and conquer is that the manipulator rarely has to get their own hands dirty. Once the seeds of doubt are planted, people often sabotage each other without any further prompting, too caught up in defending themselves or winning favor to notice the true source of the discord. By the time anyone realizes what's happened, the damage is done, and the manipulator stands unchallenged, watching from the shadows as everyone else fights their battles for them. Manufactured conflict. Manufactured conflict is a deliberate manipulation tactic where tension, arguments, or crises are fabricated or exaggerated to destabilize you and keep you emotionally off balance. It's not about genuine disagreements. It's about creating drama with a purpose, to control the narrative, shift blame, or reassert dominance. By keeping you locked in a state of conflict, the manipulator ensures you're too distracted, defensive, or drained to notice their deeper agenda. The triggers can be small, a harmless comment twisted into an insult, an imagined slight blown out of proportion, or a problem conjured entirely from thin air. Sometimes the conflict erupts right when you start to feel secure, forcing you back into uncertainty. Other times, it appears just as you're questioning them, cleverly redirecting the focus away from their behavior and onto your supposed wrongdoing. Manufactured conflict works because humans are wired to resolve tension. You may find yourself scrambling to defend your intentions, calm their anger, or repair a relationship you didn't actually damage. This shifts the power dynamic in their favor. They become the wrong party, and you become the one fighting to make amends. Over time, these false battles wear you down. You begin to tiptoe around them, censoring yourself and avoiding anything that might spark another explosion. The manipulator thrives in this chaos because it keeps you reactive instead of proactive, constantly managing their moods instead of questioning their control. In a world of manufactured conflict, peace is never the default. It's a reward they grant only when it serves their purpose, and a weapon they can snatch away without warning. Overanalyzing to cause doubt. Overanalyzing to cause doubt is a subtle yet suffocating manipulation tactic where someone takes your words, actions, or decisions and dissects them endlessly, not to understand but to undermine your confidence. Every choice you make, every sentence you speak, every look you give is pulled apart, questioned, and interpreted in the most unfavorable light. The manipulator's goal is to make you second-guess yourself so much that you start relying on them for clarity, validation, and guidance. This works because constant scrutiny creates mental fatigue. The human mind craves certainty, but when every move is subjected to relentless analysis, you lose the ability to trust your own instincts. They might repeatedly ask, "But what did you really mean by that?" Or, "Are you sure that was the right decision?" until your own memory and reasoning feel shaky. Over time, you start to wonder if you're missing something, if maybe they really do see the world more clearly than you. In relationships, this might look like a partner endlessly dissecting your tone of voice or the wording of a text, insisting there's hidden meaning behind it. In the workplace, it could be a manager questioning every minor choice until you feel incompetent. In friendships, it's the person who turns casual conversations into interrogations that leave you doubting yourself for days. The genius of this tactic is that it doesn't require direct control, just the erosion of your self-trust. Once you start believing that you can't interpret your own actions accurately, you become dependent on their version of reality, even if it's twisted to serve them. Overexposure to distressing images. Overexposure to distressing images is a psychological manipulation tactic that bombards you with shocking, graphic, or emotionally charged visuals until your perception of reality shifts. The goal isn't just to inform or warn, it's to overwhelm your senses, bypass your rational thinking, and keep you in a heightened state of fear, anger, or despair. When you're flooded with disturbing imagery, your brain's threat response kicks in, making you more reactive, more anxious, and more susceptible to suggestion. This tactic works because humans are visual creatures, and our emotional brain responds to images faster than our rational mind can process them. Distressing visuals can trigger intense emotions instantly, Panic, disgust, grief, and repeated exposure keeps those feelings alive long after the images are gone. Manipulators exploit this by using media, presentations, or even personal messages to saturate you with scenes designed to provoke a specific reaction. In politics, it can be endless footage of violence to stoke fear and justify certain policies. In activism, it might be an unrelenting stream of tragic images to push you toward a cause without space for critical thought. In abusive relationships, it could be a partner constantly showing you proof of danger in the outside world to make you dependent on them for safety. The danger is that overexposure doesn't just inform, it conditions. Your nervous system becomes hyper alert, and you start seeing the world through the lens they've chosen for you. And when fear or outrage becomes your constant state, you're far more likely to accept the solutions, restrictions, or beliefs they've been planting all along. Exploiting sunk cost fallacy. Exploiting the sunk cost fallacy is the manipulator's way of chaining you to something harmful by using your own past investment against you. The sunk cost fallacy is a mental trap where the more time, money, effort, or emotion you've already poured into something, the harder it becomes to walk away, even when it's clearly no longer serving you. The manipulator knows this, and they feed it, ensuring you stay committed far beyond reason. They remind you of everything you've already put in, framing leaving as throwing it all away. In a toxic relationship, they might say, after all we've been through, you're just going to give up. In a business deal, they might push you to finish what you started, despite mounting losses. The underlying message is always the same. Walking away means all your effort was wasted, so you should keep going, no matter how bad it gets. This works because humans are wired to avoid loss, often more than we seek gain. We hate the idea of wasted effort, so we double down, hoping our investment will eventually pay off. The manipulator exploits this hope, dangling small promises of improvement, occasional wins, or symbolic gestures to keep you hooked. The cruelty of this tactic is that it turns your loyalty, perseverance, and dedication, qualities you might be proud of, into shackles. You keep giving, keep enduring, keep waiting for the turning point that never comes. And by the time you realize the only thing keeping you there is the weight of what you've already given, you've often sacrificed far more than you ever intended to lose. Exaggerating consequences. Exaggerating consequences is a fear-based manipulation tactic where the potential outcome of your choices is blown wildly out of proportion to keep you compliant. It's not about informing you of risks. It's about distorting them until the fear of acting against the manipulator feels unbearable. Every alternative to their way is painted as catastrophic, dangerous, or doomed, leaving you trapped in a distorted vision of reality where your only safe choice is the one they want you to make. They might say things like, if you leave this job, you'll never find anything better, or if you break up with me, you'll end up alone forever. A minor disagreement becomes proof the relationship is falling apart. A small mistake becomes a career-ending disaster. They craft a world where stepping out of line doesn't just lead to discomfort, it leads to ruin. This works because fear is one of the most powerful motivators in human behavior. When you believe the stakes are life-altering, your brain shifts into survival mode, narrowing your focus to avoiding danger rather than questioning whether the danger is real. The manipulator takes advantage of this tunnel vision, using exaggerated threats to make their path seem like the only rational choice. Over time, you may find yourself thinking in their exaggerated terms even when they're not present, second-guessing opportunities or changes because the imagined consequences feel too severe. That's the true power of this tactic. Once the fear is planted deep enough, it no longer requires their constant input. You carry it with you, policing yourself, avoiding risks, and living inside the cage they built in your mind. Feigning scarcity of time. Feigning scarcity of time is a manipulative tactic that uses the illusion of urgency to push you into decisions you're not ready to make. The manipulator creates the sense that the clock is ticking, that you must act now or lose everything, whether it's an opportunity, a relationship, or their approval. By shrinking the time you have to think, they bypass your ability to evaluate the situation logically, steering you toward the choice they want before you can fully process it. This works because urgency triggers our survival instincts. When we believe time is running out, our brain shifts from careful analysis to instinctive action. Fear of missing out or making the wrong, split-second choice overrides our ability to weigh alternatives. The manipulator thrives in this chaos, knowing that the less time you have to think, the more likely you are to agree just to relieve the pressure. In sales, it might look like, this deal is only available today. Decide now or it's gone. In relationships, it could be, if you don't give me an answer tonight, I'm walking away. In workplaces, it's the boss who dumps a decision on you at the last minute, forcing you to choose without input or clarity. The cruelty of this tactic is that the time limit is often fabricated. The deadline exists only in their words, designed to keep you from realizing that there's no real rush at all. And by the time you do realize, the manipulator has already gotten what they wanted, leaving you wondering if you made the choice at all or if it was made for you. Exploiting reciprocity norms. Exploiting reciprocity norms is a subtle but powerful manipulation that weaponizes one of humanity's strongest social instincts, the urge to return favors. From childhood, we're conditioned to believe that when someone gives us something, whether it's a gift, help, or kindness, we owe them in return. Manipulators know this, and they use it to trap you in obligations you never asked for. It starts with an unsolicited gesture. They buy you coffee, give you an expensive gift, offer help you didn't request, or shower you with unexpected kindness. On the surface, it seems generous, but beneath it lies strategy. The moment you accept, the unspoken debt is planted. Later, they cash in, not for something equal, but for something far bigger, more personal, or more compromising than what they gave. And because of that deeply ingrained social norm, saying no feels wrong, even if you know you're being used. This tactic works because reciprocity is rooted in survival. In early human societies, giving and returning ensured trust and cooperation. Refusing to reciprocate risked being cast out. Today, that same wiring makes people feel guilty or selfish when they don't return a favor, even if the favor was manipulative from the start. In business, it might be the client who sends lavish gifts before negotiations, subtly ensuring you'll lean in their favor. In relationships, it's the partner who reminds you of all they've done for you when they want something. In friendships, it's the person who showers you with help only to demand loyalty, secrets, or sacrifices later. The real trap is that it feels impolite, even dishonorable, to resist. Exactly the pressure they count on to get what they wanted all along. Misusing empathy cues. Misusing empathy cues is the calculated exploitation of your natural compassion to lower your defenses and gain influence over you. It's when someone deliberately displays signals of vulnerability, tears, trembling voices, wounded expressions, stories of hardship, not as a genuine expression of feeling, but as a strategic performance designed to trigger your instinct to comfort, protect, and forgive. Humans are hardwired for empathy. When we see someone in distress, our mirror neurons fire, and we feel a pull to alleviate their suffering. A manipulator understands this primal reflex and uses it as a lever. They may share heartbreaking personal stories right when they need you to let your guard down. They might cry during confrontations to derail your anger, making you feel guilty for holding them accountable. In more subtle forms, they'll sigh, appear exhausted, or hint at struggles they don't want to burden you with, knowing you'll press for more and, in the process, soften toward them. This tactic works best when it's intertwined with selective timing. They often display these cues right after they've hurt you, when they sense you might pull away, or when they need something from you. Your brain shifts from confrontation to caretaking, and suddenly their needs become the focus instead of their wrongdoing. The cruelty lies in how it twists one of your best qualities, your ability to care, into a tool for your own manipulation. You walk away feeling like you've done the right thing by helping them, while they've successfully sidestepped responsibility or secured your compliance. And each time it works, they learn just how easily your heart can be used against you. Exaggerating credentials. Exaggerating credentials is a manipulation tactic where someone inflates, distorts, or outright fabricates their achievements, experience, or status to create an illusion of authority and competence. It's not just bragging, it's a calculated move to position themselves as someone you should trust, follow, or defer to without question. By painting themselves as an expert, they set the stage where challenging their opinions or decisions feels like questioning undeniable truth. They might embellish a job title, claim credit for work they barely touch, or drop names of influential people they barely know. Sometimes the lies are subtle, adding a few years of experience or implying qualifications they don't actually hold. Other times, it's bold and theatrical, stories of impossible successes, exclusive insider knowledge, or rare expertise that makes them sound untouchable. This tactic works because people are naturally inclined to respect and trust perceived authority. When someone seems accomplished or deeply knowledgeable, we're more likely to believe what they say, accept their guidance, and overlook inconsistencies. The manipulator exploits that instinct, using their fabricated status as a shield against scrutiny and as leverage to influence your decisions. The danger is that exaggerated credentials don't just mislead you, they create a power imbalance. You might defer to them in areas where they have no real expertise, shaping your choices and beliefs based on false authority. And when you eventually realize the truth, the damage is often already done. Decisions made, opportunities missed, and trust deeply betrayed. In the end, their fake pedestal isn't just about ego. It's about building a platform high enough to control you from above. Using loaded language. Using loaded language is a manipulation technique that relies on emotionally charged words and phrases to influence how you think and feel before you've even had a chance to process the facts. The manipulator carefully chooses terms designed to provoke a specific reaction: anger, guilt, fear, shame, or loyalty, so that your emotions take control of your judgment. Instead of debating ideas logically, you're pushed into reacting instinctively to the emotional weight of the words. This works because language shapes perception. A single word can paint someone as a hero or a villain, a cause as noble or dangerous, an idea as liberating or immoral. By using extreme or exaggerated terms, the manipulator hijacks your feelings, bypassing rational analysis entirely. They might call someone selfish instead of independent, reckless instead of confident, or ungrateful instead of assertive. Once the emotional frame is set, every detail is filtered through that lens. In relationships, loaded language might sound like "you're abandoning me" when you simply ask for space. In politics, it could be labeling dissenters as traitors or enemies. In workplaces, it's branding an opposing viewpoint as toxic to shut it down without discussion. The danger is that once loaded language takes root, it can change not only how you see the situation, but how you see yourself. You begin to internalize the labels, shaping your identity around someone else's manipulative framing. And by the time you realize the words were chosen to control you, their emotional echo is already guiding your choices in ways you never consciously agreed to. Framing opponents as enemies. Framing opponents as enemies is a manipulative tactic that transforms disagreement into warfare. Instead of allowing space for differing perspectives, the manipulator paints anyone who challenges them as dangerous, malicious, or morally corrupt. It's not enough to say, they're wrong. They must be portrayed as a threat, an outsider, someone whose very existence endangers our way of life. The goal is to shut down dialogue, inflame emotion, and unite people under a banner of fear and hostility. This works because humans are tribal by nature. For thousands of years, survival depended on loyalty to our group and suspicion of outsiders. By triggering this ancient instinct, manipulators can bypass reason and drive people to rally behind them without question. The more you see someone as an enemy, the less likely you are to listen to them, empathize, or even believe they have good intentions. In politics, it could be a leader describing critics as traitors or threats to national security. In workplaces, it might be a manager painting a dissenting employee as toxic or harmful to team morale. In personal relationships, it can be one partner convincing friends or family that the other is manipulative or dangerous, isolating them in the process. The brilliance and the danger of this tactic is that it unites people through shared hatred rather than shared understanding. Once the opponent has been cast as an enemy, anything done to oppose or silence them feels justified. And when fear and loyalty replace truth and reason, the manipulator no longer has to win the argument. They just have to make sure you believe you're at war. Labeling to limit options. Labeling to limit options is a manipulative tactic where someone assigns you a fixed identity, often subtly degrading or overly simplistic, so they can control your choices, your self-perception, and even your future. It's not just a name or description. It's a box they build around you, reinforced every time they repeat it. Once you accept the label, you start making decisions that fit inside it, unconsciously shrinking your own possibilities. This works because humans are deeply influenced by how they're perceived, especially by those they care about or respect. A manipulator might call you the responsible one, ensuring you always handle the work while others slack off. Or they might label you as too sensitive, invalidating your feelings and making you second-guess your reactions. They can even brand you as lazy, selfish, or the difficult one, planting seeds of doubt that chip away at your confidence until you start acting in ways that align with their definition. The power of labeling lies in repetition and authority. The more it's said, the more it becomes part of your identity, not just in their eyes, but in your own. This can trap you in a cycle where breaking free feels like betraying who you are, even if that identity was never truly yours. In relationships, workplaces, and families, these labels are used to keep you predictable, compliant, and easy to manage. And the most dangerous part? Once the label sticks, they don't have to control your every move. You'll police yourself, living inside the boundaries they've drawn, never realizing the walls were built by someone else's words. Strategic ambiguity in agreements. Strategic ambiguity in agreements is a calculated manipulation where commitments are intentionally kept vague, leaving just enough room for interpretation to favor the manipulator later. It's not sloppy communication. It's a deliberate choice to avoid clarity so they can shift expectations, dodge accountability, or redefine terms whenever it benefits them. You think you've agreed to something concrete, but what you've actually agreed to is a fog. They might say, "We'll work something out," or "I'll take care of it," without ever specifying how, when, or to what extent. In professional settings, it could be a verbal promise of promotion down the line with no timeline or written terms. In relationships, it might sound like a commitment to be better without defining what better means. These statements feel reassuring in the moment, but the lack of detail makes them meaningless when it's time to hold them accountable. This tactic works because humans crave resolution. The manipulator offers just enough to make you feel secure and stop pressing for more details, trusting that you'll fill in the blanks with what you hope they mean. Later, when you call them on it, they can claim you misunderstood or assumed too much, turning the blame back on you. Over time, strategic ambiguity erodes trust and keeps you in a loop of uncertainty. You can never pin them down because the agreement was never truly defined, and that's the genius of it. When nothing is concrete, nothing can be broken. They stay untouchable while you're left grasping at promises that were designed to dissolve the moment you try to hold them. Planting rumors. Planting rumors is a psychological manipulation that spreads like poison, seeping into perceptions and relationships long before the target has a chance to defend themselves. The manipulator carefully crafts a piece of information, often a mix of truth, exaggeration, and outright lies, and releases it into the social environment like a virus. They rarely present it as a direct accusation. Instead, it's framed as concern, something they heard, or a harmless observation, making it sound credible and innocent, while its real purpose is to damage reputations and isolate the target. This works because humans are wired to pay attention to gossip. Our survival instincts evolved to value social awareness, and hearing something about another person triggers curiosity and caution. A manipulator exploits this by ensuring the rumor plays into existing fears, biases, or suspicions, so it spreads faster and sticks deeper. Even if the target denies it, the seed of doubt has been planted. Once an idea takes root in someone's mind, it's almost impossible to fully erase. In workplaces, a rumor might be that a colleague is difficult to work with, slowly eroding trust until opportunities dry up. In friendships, it could be suggesting someone is talking behind people's backs, causing subtle shifts in how others treat them. In relationships, it might be whispering that a partner is flirting with someone else, stirring jealousy and distrust. The cruelty of planting rumors lies in its invisibility. By the time the victim senses something is wrong, the manipulator has already altered the social landscape around them, turning allies into skeptics and forcing them to fight an enemy they can't even see. Weaponizing kindness. Weaponizing kindness is a manipulation tactic that cloaks control in generosity, making it almost impossible to call out without looking ungrateful or cruel. The manipulator uses acts of kindness, not as genuine goodwill, but as calculated investments to gain leverage over you. Every gesture, every favor, every act of help is a silent transaction, with a price you won't see until later. It begins with seemingly selfless acts, paying for things you didn't ask for, stepping in to help when you could have handled it yourself, or going out of their way to do something for you in front of others. On the surface, it looks like they care deeply, but beneath that warmth lies strategy. The moment you accept, a silent debt is planted. Later, when they need something, they cash in with lines like, "After everything I've done for you," or "You owe me this much." This tactic works because kindness disarms us. We're conditioned to view generosity as pure, to feel guilty when we don't reciprocate. The manipulator counts on this, knowing that once they've been the good guy, saying no makes you feel selfish, ungrateful, or even cruel. In relationships, it might be a partner who showers you with favors, then uses them as leverage to control your choices. In the workplace, it's a boss who does you a favor by giving you opportunities, then expects unquestioning loyalty. Among friends, it can be the one who keeps a mental tally of every kindness, waiting for the day they can use it against you. The trap is simple. Their kindness isn't a gift, it's a leash, and every favor pulls it tighter around your neck. Promoting dependency through incompetence. Promoting dependency through incompetence is a deceptively sly tactic where someone pretends or exaggerates their inability to handle certain tasks, responsibilities, or challenges so that you step in and take over. Over time, you become the one who always fixes, manages, and rescues, while they maintain control by ensuring you're too busy or too entangled to step away. It's a quiet form of manipulation that feeds on your sense of responsibility and competence. At first, it can look like harmless forgetfulness or a genuine lack of skill. They can't figure out the finances, so you handle them. They don't know how to cook, so you feed them. They mess things up at work, so you redo their tasks. But this so-called incompetence has a purpose. It shifts the burden onto you while allowing them to avoid accountability. Even worse, it creates an unspoken agreement. You're needed because they can't function without you. This dependency becomes addictive, not for you, but for them. By being the one who doesn't know how, they ensure you never have the freedom to focus on your own needs because you're too busy compensating for theirs. It keeps you in a caretaker role, locked in by guilt and the fear that if you walk away, everything will fall apart. The cruelty of this tactic is that it wears you down slowly. You may not realize you've been carrying double the load until exhaustion sets in. And by then, the dependency is so ingrained that leaving feels like abandonment, when in reality, their helplessness was never as real as they led you to believe. Creating false urgency with deadlines. Creating false urgency with deadlines is a manipulative tactic where time pressure is fabricated or exaggerated to force you into making decisions before you're ready. It's not about genuine deadlines. It's about manufacturing a ticking clock so you feel cornered, rushed, and too panicked to think critically. The manipulator knows that when fear of missing out collides with the pressure of time, rational judgment crumbles. They might say an exclusive offer expires tonight, even though it's available year-round. A boss might demand you finish a project by end of day for a meeting that isn't scheduled until next week. A partner might insist you decide now about a major life choice, framing any hesitation as proof you're not committed. The goal is to strip away your ability to weigh options, seek advice, or notice red flags. This tactic works because urgency activates our survival instincts. The brain shifts into reactive mode, prioritizing speed over careful thought. Instead of asking, "Is this right for me?" you're asking, "How fast can I act before I lose it?" The manipulator uses this to push you into choices that serve them, knowing you'll have little time to question their motives. The cruel brilliance is in what happens after the decision is made. Once the artificial deadline passes, you may realize there was never any real rush, but by then, you've already signed, agreed, paid, or committed. And that's the point. False urgency steals not just your time, but your freedom to choose with clarity, leaving you trapped in decisions made under pressure that was never real in the first place. Cherry-picking evidence. Cherry-picking evidence is a manipulation tactic that distorts reality by presenting only the facts, examples, or data that support a desired conclusion while deliberately ignoring or hiding anything that might contradict it. The manipulator doesn't have to fabricate lies. They simply curate the truth in a way that tells a completely different story by showing you only a carefully selected slice of reality. They make their argument appear airtight, leaving you blind to the bigger picture. This works because people naturally give more weight to the information they're shown, especially if it's delivered with confidence and detail. When someone floods you with proof, statistics, anecdotes, quotes, it feels persuasive, even if the proof is only a fraction of the whole truth. The human brain is not wired to automatically search for missing context. Instead, we tend to assume the evidence presented is representative of reality. In relationships, cherry-picking might look like a partner bringing up only the times you made mistakes while ignoring all the times you acted with kindness and integrity. In workplaces, it could be a manager highlighting only failed projects to justify denying you a promotion. In politics, it's showing only the polls, studies, or stories that align with an agenda while burying the rest. The danger of cherry-picking evidence is that it creates a false sense of certainty. You think you're making an informed decision when in truth, you're acting on a distorted version of reality. And by the time you discover the missing pieces, the manipulator has often already achieved their goal, using selective truth to craft a convincing lie. Exploiting the bandwagon effect. Exploiting the bandwagon effect is a psychological manipulation tactic that pressures you into agreement by making it seem like everyone else is already on board. The manipulator doesn't persuade you with facts or reason. They persuade you with the weight of imagined consensus. By framing their stance, product, or demand as the popular choice, they push you to conform because going against the crowd feels risky, isolating, or even foolish. This works because humans are social creatures wired for survival in groups. For most of human history, standing apart from the tribe could mean danger, while blending in meant safety. That instinct still drives us today, and manipulators exploit it by making you feel like the odd one out if you don't follow along. The more proof they provide, real or fabricated, that others agree, the more pressure you feel to get in line. In marketing, it's slogans like America's #1 choice or join millions who already switch. In politics, it's leaders claiming the people have spoken before the debate is even over. In personal relationships, it can be someone saying, all our friends think you're overreacting, to shut down your concerns. The bandwagon effect doesn't just change opinions, it overrides them. You stop asking if something is right for you and start asking why you're not already part of it. And that's the danger. The manipulator doesn't have to prove they're right. They just have to convince you you're the only one who hasn't joined the crowd. Leveraging emotional contagion. Leveraging emotional contagion is the calculated use of one of humanity's most primal instincts, the tendency to unconsciously absorb and mirror the emotions of those around us. Emotions are contagious. When someone projects intense joy, rage, fear, or despair, those feelings can spread like wildfire through a room, altering moods and behaviors without anyone realizing it's happening. Manipulators weaponize this, deliberately radiating the emotions they want others to feel in order to steer conversations, decisions, and even conflicts in their favor. This tactic works because our brains are equipped with mirror neurons that fire not just when we act, but when we witness others acting or feeling. If someone smiles warmly, we're likely to feel more relaxed. If they panic, we feel a surge of anxiety. A manipulator exploits this wiring by choosing emotions strategically. They may project overconfidence to make others doubt their own concerns or show exaggerated outrage to pressure people into siding with them. In relationships, they might feign deep sadness to make you feel guilty for asserting boundaries, or display extreme enthusiasm so you feel pressured to match their excitement and agree to plans you wouldn't normally accept. In workplaces, a leader may create a sense of crisis through visible stress and urgency, pushing the team to make rush decisions without proper scrutiny. The danger lies in how invisible it is. You think you're feeling your own emotions, when in fact you've been infected by theirs. By controlling the emotional climate, they control the choices made within it, leaving you convinced that what you feel is real when it may have been carefully planted in you from the start. Inducing cognitive dissonance. Inducing cognitive dissonance is a psychological manipulation where the manipulator deliberately forces you into a state of mental conflict, making your beliefs, actions, or self-image clash in ways that cause deep discomfort. Humans are wired to seek internal consistency. We want our actions to align with our values, our words to match our reality. When that harmony is shattered, the tension is so unsettling that we'll do almost anything to restore it. The manipulator knows this and exploits it to reshape your behavior, your loyalties, and even your identity. They might praise you for being honest, while subtly encouraging you to lie for them, or tell you you're independent, while slowly making you dependent on them. The contradictions stack up until you either reject the truth in front of you or change your values to fit the situation. Often, people resolve the discomfort not by leaving the manipulator, but by rationalizing the manipulator's actions, convincing themselves that the contradiction isn't as bad as it feels. This tactic is powerful because it makes you question yourself more than you question them. The more often you bend your beliefs to match your actions, the more your moral compass shifts. You start agreeing to things you once swore you'd never tolerate, not because you've been openly forced, but because the manipulator has made it too mentally painful to live in contradiction. Over time, you can lose sight of where you truly stand. You forget what you believed before they entered your life, because piece by piece, they've taught you to resolve your discomfort by aligning with them until your truth is no longer yours at all. Exploiting nostalgia. Exploiting nostalgia is a manipulation tactic that weaponizes your fond memories, using your emotional attachment to the past to influence your decisions in the present. The manipulator taps into moments that once made you feel safe, happy, or deeply connected, and then links those emotions to their agenda. It's not about celebrating your memories. It's about using them to steer you toward choices you might not otherwise make. This works because nostalgia has a powerful neurological effect. When you recall cherished times, your brain floods with dopamine and oxytocin, softening your defenses and making you more receptive. The manipulator knows this and deliberately invokes shared good old days to stir longing for a time when things felt better, implying that the only way to reclaim that feeling is to follow their lead. In relationships, it could be an ex reminding you of the amazing trips and laughs until sunrise, glossing over the pain that caused the breakup. In families, it's a parent bringing up your childhood memories to guilt you into compliance. In marketing, it's brands using imagery, slogans, or music from your youth to spark trust and familiarity, even when the product itself is new or inferior. The danger of exploiting nostalgia is that it blurs reality. The longing it creates can make you forget the complexity of the past, focusing only on the highlights and ignoring the reasons things changed. When you're wrapped in the warmth of memory, it's easy to overlook present red flags, because in that moment, it doesn't feel like manipulation. It feels like coming home, even if the home they're selling you never truly existed. Exploiting survivor bias. Exploiting survivor bias is a manipulative tactic that distorts your perception by focusing only on the visible success stories while ignoring the countless failures hidden from view. The manipulator uses selective examples to make you believe that success is common, attainable, and inevitable if you follow their path, without showing you the far greater number of people who tried and didn't make it. It's not about giving you the full truth. It's about selling you a filtered reality. This works because the human mind naturally pays more attention to what it can see and experiences difficulty imagining what's missing. When we see shining examples, people who made it, companies that thrived, relationships that beat the odds, we subconsciously believe those outcomes are typical. The manipulator leans into this bias, presenting only the winners as proof that their method, advice, or demand is flawless. In business, it might be a self-help guru pointing to a handful of millionaires who followed their system, without mentioning the thousands who lost everything. In politics, it could be citing only the successful cases of a policy while hiding the damage it caused to most. In relationships, it might be someone saying, "Look at couples who stayed together through worse," ignoring the fact that most didn't. The power of survivor bias lies in what you don't see. By showing you only the survivors, they make failure invisible, so you're more likely to take risks, agree to terms, or endure hardship under the false belief that the odds are in your favor. In reality, the odds were never what they claimed. They just hid the bodies. Normalizing harmful behavior. Normalizing harmful behavior is the slow, deliberate process of making actions that should cause outrage or resistance seem ordinary, acceptable, or even inevitable. It's not about shocking you. It's about dulling your reaction over time until what once made you recoil barely stirs you at all. The manipulator's goal is to shift your baseline, eroding your sense of what's right, healthy, or safe so that you stop recognizing abuse, exploitation, or manipulation for what it is. This tactic works through gradual exposure. At first, the harmful behavior might be subtle, a cruel joke, brushed off as just teasing, a small lie excused as no big deal, a broken promise minimized as just a misunderstanding. Each incident is followed by reassurance, justification, or laughter to ease the sting. Then slowly, the behavior intensifies, and because you've adapted at each step, your tolerance grows without you realizing it. In relationships, this might mean you once swore you'd never tolerate yelling or insults, but months later, you're enduring constant criticism and convincing yourself it's normal. In the workplace, it can mean accepting increasingly unreasonable demands because that's just how it's done here. The manipulator may even use others to reinforce the illusion, pointing out how everyone accepts this treatment, making you feel abnormal for questioning it. The true cruelty is that once harmful behavior becomes your normal, you stop fighting it. You stop seeing it as wrong. And by the time you realize your standards have been rewritten, you may already be living in a reality where what once would have broken you is now just another Tuesday. Exploiting fear of missing out. Exploiting fear of missing out, or FOMO, is a manipulation tactic that plays on the deep human anxiety of being left behind, excluded, or losing an opportunity that others are enjoying. The manipulator creates a sense of urgency and scarcity, making it feel as though you must act immediately or risk being shut out forever. This tactic doesn't just pressure you, it triggers a primal survival instinct tied to social belonging and resource security. This works because humans are wired to value what they believe is rare or slipping away. The manipulator amplifies this by hinting at exclusivity, showcasing others who have already seized the chance, or implying that hesitation will make you regretful and alone. They may show you curated glimpses of what you're supposedly missing, smiling faces, exciting opportunities, enviable lifestyles, until you feel a gnawing emptiness that can only be relieved by saying yes to their offer. In marketing, this could be only 3 spots left, join now or miss out forever. In social circles, it might be a friend saying, everyone's going to this event, you'll be the only one not there. In relationships, it's a partner threatening that someone else will gladly take your place if you don't comply. The danger of exploiting FOMO is that it overrides rational decision-making. You stop asking whether the offer, event, or relationship is even good for you, focusing only on the fear of loss. And once that fear takes hold, you're no longer acting out of genuine desire. You're acting to silence the ache of imagined exclusion, exactly as the manipulator intended. Overwhelming with contradictory information. Overwhelming with contradictory information is a psychological manipulation tactic that bombards you with statements, facts, and arguments that clash with each other until your ability to think critically breaks down. It's not about convincing you of one truth. It's about making truth itself feel unstable, so you stop trying to figure it out and either give in to their narrative or become too paralyzed to resist. This works because the human brain craves coherence. When we're faced with endless contradictions, our mental energy drains quickly. Decision fatigue sets in, and confusion replaces confidence. Manipulators exploit this by flooding you with mixed messages, changing their story, or offering so many conflicting details that you can't tell what's real anymore. By the time you untangle one claim, they've thrown 5 more at you, each muddying the waters further. In politics, it might be leaders constantly contradicting themselves, making it impossible to hold them accountable because there's always another version to hide behind. In relationships, it could be a partner telling you one thing in private and the opposite in public, leaving you unsure which reality to trust. In business, it's the company that keeps shifting explanations for a decision until you stop questioning it entirely. The real danger is that contradictory overload doesn't just confuse you, it erodes your trust in your own judgment. When reality feels too chaotic to navigate, you become more willing to accept the manipulator's version of events, not because it's convincing, but because it's the only thing that feels stable in the storm they created. Strategic use of silence. Strategic use of silence is a psychological manipulation tactic where a person deliberately withholds words, responses, or engagement, not out of calm reflection, but as a calculated move to control the emotional temperature of the room and tilt the power balance in their favor. It's not simple quiet. It's a vacuum designed to make you fill it with apologies, concessions, or revelations you never intended to give. This works because humans are deeply uncomfortable with prolonged silence in tense situations. When someone goes quiet during conflict, the absence of feedback can feel like rejection, judgment, or emotional withdrawal. The manipulator exploits this discomfort, knowing you'll rush to break the silence just to ease the tension, often by giving them exactly what they want. In relationships, it might be a partner going completely still and expressionless after you voice a concern, forcing you to stumble over explanations until you retract your point. In negotiations, it can be a business counterpart who says nothing after you name your terms, pushing you to nervously lower your offer. In arguments, it could be someone who refuses to answer, making you feel like the unreasonable aggressor. The danger of strategic silence is that it flips the emotional burden entirely onto you. The longer it lasts, the more you doubt yourself, and the more desperate you become to fix the moment. By the time the silence breaks, you've often handed them the upper hand without them ever needing to raise their voice or say a single word. Using fake scarcity in resources. Using fake scarcity in resources is the calculated act of making something seem rare, limited, or in high demand when it's not, creating urgency, anxiety, and competition where none should exist. The manipulator's goal is to trigger your fear of missing out, pushing you to act quickly, compromise your boundaries, or agree to unfavorable terms because you believe the opportunity is slipping away. This tactic works because our brains are wired to place higher value on things that appear scarce. In our evolutionary past, limited resources meant survival, so the instinct to grab what's running out is deeply ingrained. Manipulators exploit this by creating artificial shortages, claiming there are only a few spots left, that a deal expires tonight, or that everyone else wants this. Even in personal relationships, someone might suggest their attention or commitment is in short supply, making you fight harder to secure it. In business, fake scarcity might mean holding back inventory to drive up demand or pretending that a price increase is imminent. In social situations, it can mean creating the illusion that time with them is rare and precious, so you rearrange your life to fit their schedule. The cruelty lies in the deception. You're not making choices freely. You're reacting to a false sense of urgency they engineered. You may spend money you can't afford, rush into agreements you don't fully understand, or compete against others for something that was never truly running out. And when you finally realize the scarcity was a lie, you're left not only with regret, but with the bitter awareness that you were never chasing the resource. You were chasing the illusion they dangled in front of you. Framing lies as misunderstandings. Framing lies as misunderstandings is a manipulative tactic that allows someone to lie without ever fully admitting they've done so. When caught, they don't own up to the deception. Instead, they twist the situation to make it seem like you simply took it the wrong way, misheard, or misinterpreted their words. It's a strategy that shifts the blame from their dishonesty to your supposed inability to understand, making you feel guilty or foolish for confronting them in the first place. This works because it exploits your desire to avoid conflict and preserve harmony. Most people don't want to believe they've been lied to, especially by someone they trust. By framing their deceit as an innocent misunderstanding, the manipulator offers you a way to let them off the hook without calling them a liar outright. It creates enough doubt to make you question whether you're overreacting, which weakens your resolve to hold them accountable. In relationships, this might sound like, "That's not what I meant, you just read too much into it." In workplaces, it could be a colleague saying, "You must have misunderstood the deadline," when they deliberately misled you. In friendships, it's, "I never actually said that, you just assumed." The danger is that this tactic erodes your trust in your own perception. Over time, you may become hesitant to challenge inconsistencies, allowing the manipulator to keep bending the truth without consequence. And the more they get away with it, the more they learn that the easiest way to hide a lie isn't to deny it, it's to make you believe it was never a lie at all. Exploiting availability bias. Exploiting availability bias is a manipulation tactic that takes advantage of the brain's tendency to judge the likelihood of something based on how easily examples come to mind. The manipulator deliberately feeds you vivid, memorable, or recent examples, often exaggerated or selectively chosen, so that these moments feel far more common or likely than they actually are. The goal is to shape your decisions and beliefs, not through logic or data, but through what your mind can most easily recall. This works because human memory is not neutral. We give more weight to information that is fresh, emotionally charged, or striking, even if it's rare or irrelevant. If you've just heard 3 stories of plane crashes, flying feels riskier, even though statistically it's still safer than driving. Manipulators know this and load your mental highlight reel with whatever will push you toward their desired conclusion. In politics, it might be constant coverage of isolated crimes to make an entire group seem dangerous. In marketing, it could be a company showing only glowing customer stories, so failures fade from consideration. In relationships, it can be a partner frequently bringing up times they were right to make you forget the countless times they were wrong. The brilliance and the danger of exploiting availability bias is that it feels like you're thinking for yourself. You recall vivid examples and believe your conclusion is rational, when in reality, the manipulator planted those examples in your mind, knowing exactly how they would color your judgment and tip your decision in their favor. Exploiting optimism bias. Exploiting optimism bias is a manipulation tactic that preys on our natural tendency to believe that bad things are less likely to happen to us than to other people. The manipulator leans into this built-in human blind spot, encouraging you to underestimate risks, overestimate positive outcomes, and make choices you'd never agree to if you were thinking with cold, hard realism. It's not about telling you the full truth, it's about feeding the version you want to believe. This works because optimism bias is deeply wired into the human brain as a survival mechanism. Believing that the future will be better than the past keeps us motivated, hopeful, and willing to take action. But when that bias is deliberately manipulated, it becomes a trap. The manipulator paints a picture of flawless success, brushes off potential dangers, and assures you that everything will work out while hiding the very real pitfalls. In business, it might be an investor promising massive returns with virtually no risk, knowing you'll focus on the reward instead of the fine print. In relationships, it's a partner convincing you that their bad habits will definitely change this time. In politics, it's the leader who promises prosperity without sacrifice, glossing over the costs entirely. The danger of exploiting optimism bias is that it makes you complicit in your own deception. You silence the doubts in your head, ignore the warning signs, and move forward with a smile, believing you're walking into a dream, when in reality, you're stepping straight into the trap they've built for you. Creating false equivalence. Creating false equivalence is the manipulative act of comparing two situations, actions, or people as if they are morally or logically equal when they are not, in order to blur lines, deflect blame, or shut down criticism. It's a way of dragging something undeniable into murky waters, making the truth feel less clear and guilt feel more evenly distributed. The manipulator's goal is simple. If they can convince you that everyone's just as bad, no one can truly be held accountable. This tactic works because humans crave fairness and balance. When someone presents two sides as equally flawed, our brains often accept it without digging deeper, especially if the manipulator delivers the comparison with confidence. In relationships, this might sound like, "Sure, I yelled at you, but you've ignored my texts before. We both make mistakes." In politics, it can mean equating minor missteps with serious corruption to make all parties look equally guilty. In workplaces, it can be comparing your isolated error to their repeated failures so the spotlight moves off them. False equivalence distorts moral weight. It takes vastly different actions and frames them as if they belong on the same scale. This not only minimizes real harm, but can also trick the victim into feeling they have no right to protest because they've been painted as just as bad. The cruelty here is that it exploits your desire to be fair-minded. You may end up apologizing for things that don't compare in severity, softening your stance, or accepting a truce that benefits only them. And once they've blurred the lines enough, truth itself becomes negotiable, exactly where they want it. Using strawman arguments. Using strawman arguments is a manipulation tactic where someone distorts or oversimplifies your position into something weaker, more extreme, or outright absurd, then attacks that false version instead of what you actually said. The goal is to make your stance look foolish or indefensible, allowing them to win the argument without ever addressing your real point. It's a sleight of hand in conversation, replacing your words with a twisted caricature that's easier to tear down. This works because most people feel compelled to defend themselves when accused of holding an extreme or ridiculous view. The manipulator counts on you becoming sidetracked, wasting your energy fighting against the distorted claim rather than holding them accountable for misrepresenting you. They may exaggerate your statement, strip away key context, or reframe it in a way that sounds morally or logically wrong. In relationships, you might say, "I need more time for myself," and they respond with, "So you're saying you don't care about us at all?" In workplaces, you could suggest improving a process, and someone fires back, "So you want to throw away everything we've built?" In politics, it's turning a call for balanced reform into, "They want to destroy the system entirely." The danger of strawman arguments is that they not only derail the conversation, but they also plant seeds of doubt in others who hear the twisted version and believe it. Over time, this tactic can reshape your public image, making you look like you stand for things you never said, while the manipulator walks away appearing as the reasonable, victorious one. Pretending vulnerability to disarm. Pretending vulnerability to disarm is a manipulation tactic where someone fabricates or exaggerates weakness, helplessness, or emotional fragility to lower your defenses and gain your trust. It's a performance designed to make you feel safe around them, drop your guard, and even protect or support them, while they quietly position themselves to take advantage of you. This works because humans are wired for empathy. When we see someone as vulnerable, our instinct is to comfort, assist, or shield them. The manipulator exploits this by showing you just enough struggle to make you believe they're harmless. They might share a tragic backstory, cry in a tense moment, or confess insecurities that make you think they could never hurt me. But once you're emotionally invested, you become less likely to question their actions, suspect their motives, or set boundaries. In relationships, it might be a partner who frequently plays the victim to avoid accountability, turning every confrontation into a rescue mission. In workplaces, it can be a colleague who pretends to be overwhelmed or inexperienced, so you'll take on their responsibilities. In social circles, it's the friend who constantly presents themselves as fragile, knowing others will step in to protect them from criticism or consequences. The danger is that fake vulnerability feels real in the moment. It activates compassion, not suspicion. By the time you realize the wounded person is pulling the strings, they may have already gained your loyalty, your secrets, or your compliance, all without ever having to show strength in the open. The weakness you saw wasn't a flaw, it was bait. Manufactured consensus. Manufactured consensus is a manipulation tactic that fabricates the illusion of widespread agreement to pressure you into compliance. The manipulator makes it seem like everyone supports a certain idea, policy, or action, even when that's far from the truth, so that resisting feels like going against the crowd. It's not about presenting facts or genuine opinion. It's about creating a false social reality where dissent feels abnormal, risky, or even shameful. This works because humans are wired to seek social harmony and avoid isolation. When we believe a majority already agrees on something, we're far more likely to adopt the same stance, even if we haven't examined it ourselves. Manipulators exploit this instinct by fabricating polls, cherry-picking voices that match their agenda, amplifying certain opinions in media, or silencing dissent so it appears there is none. The result is a carefully constructed echo chamber that drowns out alternative viewpoints. In politics, it might be staged crowds and controlled media coverage to make a leader seem universally adored. In corporate culture, it's leadership claiming that the entire team supports a decision while dissenting voices are excluded from the conversation. In personal relationships, it can be one partner insisting that everyone agrees you're wrong, using imagined allies to corner you into submission. The power of manufactured consensus lies in how it rewires your perception of reality. Once you believe you're the only one who disagrees, your resistance weakens, not because the argument was convincing, but because standing alone feels too costly. And in that moment, you're no longer deciding for yourself. You're following a crowd that may not even exist, creating us versus them mentality. Creating an us versus them mentality is a manipulative strategy that divides people into two opposing camps. One you're made to feel part of, us, and one you're taught to distrust, resent, or even hate, them. It's the emotional equivalent of building a wall where loyalty is rewarded, dissent is punished, and unity is forged not through shared values, but through shared enemies. The manipulator's goal is to bind you so tightly to the us group that you'll defend it without question, even when it's harming you. This works because humans are tribal by nature. Our survival instincts once depended on belonging to a group, and exclusion meant vulnerability. Manipulators weaponize this by portraying us as righteous, special, and misunderstood, while painting them as dangerous, ignorant, or morally corrupt. They feed you selective stories, exaggerated threats, and emotional language until you feel morally obligated to protect the group at all costs. In relationships, this can mean a partner isolating you from friends or family by framing them as jealous or toxic. In workplaces, it might mean leadership fostering hostility toward competitors or even other departments to rally loyalty. On a larger scale, it's used in politics, religion, and cults, where entire identities are built on the idea that outsiders are wrong, evil, or less than human. The danger is that once the us versus them mindset takes hold, critical thinking collapses. You stop questioning the flaws of your own side because doing so feels like betrayal, and you see disagreement as an attack. In this way, the manipulator doesn't just control your actions, they control your alliances, your worldview, and even the boundaries of who you believe deserves your empathy. Exploiting loss aversion. Exploiting loss aversion is a psychological manipulation that takes advantage of a powerful truth about human behavior. We fear losing something far more than we desire gaining something new. The manipulator frames situations so that you focus on what you might lose: security, love, opportunities, status, instead of what you could gain or what it might cost to stay. By keeping your attention on potential losses, they make you more willing to accept unfavorable terms, toxic relationships, or unfair deals just to avoid the pain of letting go. This works because loss aversion is deeply wired into the human brain. Studies show that losing feels roughly twice as painful as winning feels good. The manipulator knows this and uses it to corner you. They might say, "If you leave, you'll never find someone like me," or "If you don't take this deal now, you'll regret it forever." They'll remind you of the time, effort, or love you've already invested, making it seem like walking away would be throwing everything away. In relationships, this can keep you clinging to someone who's long stopped treating you well, simply because you can't bear the thought of losing the memories or the dream of what it once was. In business, it might be a boss making you feel that leaving the job means losing your stability, even if you're miserable. The trap of exploiting loss aversion is that it turns fear into a leash. You stop thinking about whether staying serves you and instead become obsessed with what leaving might cost, until the idea of freedom feels like the greater risk.